it's the Alex Jones was right meme. Like, you realize how many times that guy's been right? Like, how is he so good at predicting all these things that happen? Because the guy's balls deep in it all day long. Yeah. You could call him right now. It's like, I'm doing the documents. I'm reading the research right now. This is sick. This is what they're doing. This is the plan. I talk to him all the time. Like, we text each other. Every time something's crazy, I'll text him. Like, what is this? And he'll send me all these documents.
He's talking about, I saw something he said the other day about, you gotta have somebody in case they turn the power off, turn the water off, do something like that.
Well, there's a lot of people that think that, including me. Because if I was a foreign government and I wanted to cripple America, I would kill the power grid. We'd go feral in 2 weeks. It would be chaos in 2 weeks. As soon as people don't have water and food and their children are starving, people go crazy. They start eating dogs. They start shooting deer in their neighborhood, and then that runs out. And then they realize they don't know how to keep food good. When it's hot out, they don't know how to get water. They don't know how to treat water. It could get real bad real quick. We are not self-sufficient, even remotely. There's small pockets of human beings in this country that are self-sufficient, but if you had to guess how many people could survive off-grid if everything went haywire, it's like 1%, which is probably what happens when there's a massive catastrophe, when some sort of a global catastrophic event, like a super volcano or something along those lines.
Another younger dryas.
Yeah, it's probably 1% of the people survive.
That's probably what happened back then, too.
Yeah. Well, that's what I've always said is the reason why if you go back, look at like ancient Egypt. Look at how insanely sophisticated they were. And if you subscribe to the Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson's perspective, which I do, which is that at one point in time, there was an incredibly sophisticated society, probably more sophisticated than we are, that lived in Africa, in Egypt, and that those people were probably in a different direction, but far more advanced than we are today. And then they were wiped out. And then go after that. So if you're talking about 11,000 years ago, 11,800 years ago when they got wiped out and it just, we're down to like 1% of the population, think about what history looks like when you go back 4,000 years, 3,000. It's barbarians.
So here we are, we're continuing to fight with dignity as Americans. We're continuing to do our best to resist the overwhelming total onslaught of the PSYOPs warfare that we're dealing with here in America. Surprised parents all across the country are losing control, the hearts and minds of their own children, to this sinister and awful and vile Marxist warfare, psychological warfare that's being aimed at the children in the classroom and in the culture and on TikTok and everywhere. Everywhere there's Rosie O'Donnell's disgusting face trying to use her like weird Job of the Hutt thing to like explain to us why they should all control our kids' minds and pervert all our children. And consequently, the result will be that they just can't reproduce. They just can't reproduce because they're sexually degenerated and twisted. And when you get all nipped and tucked in your privates, and you get your top surgery, I guess to feel more like a boy, you do all that to ultimately, in the end, castrate your own fertility. So you won't be able to feed a child. You won't be able to nurse a child. You know, all the things they do to encourage these children who don't have the ability to consent. These kids they're not able to make permanent life decisions, right? They can't buy a beer. They can't join the military. But apparently these doctors, these sick, twisted phalanx, this fifth column of political propagandists, distortionists, and provocateurs are provocatoring and taking advantage of kids in the school who are open to being, quote unquote, transitioned. And we should take these people out. We should take them out. You know, we should just totally just put them out. And of course, they're going to go ahead and do that to us while we sit on our hands. We're going to sit on our hands. And we know what we should do. We know we should do the right thing to protect America. We should act like proper adults, like proper proper grown-ups, proper parents should do to protect their kids. But we're just sitting here idly by. Everyone's hiding out. Oh, I don't want to lose my job. I don't want my stuff to be affected. How will we live? Everyone's terrified, terrorized. But these people over here on the left, they're getting ready to wipe us off the map. I'm not talking about politically or through voting ballots. I'm talking about they're coming to kill us. They're going to kill us, guys. They're going to kill us as sure as the day is long. And I don't know how many of us are going to be around in the future to be, talking about these issues. So we have to be prepared to recognize, right, that the whole idea of bringing us to this place of a total crisis, a total systematic gridlock of the gears of American institutions and the actual governing apparatus that was a constitutionally based republic once long ago. The idea is like, even with Joe Biden, challenging the Texas governor and trying to use the federal government to shut down Texas from controlling its border. And he's trying to use the power of the federal government as out of control and illegal and tyrannical these war powers are. Just think about it, guys. Just executive orders. I know we're all young. We all just arrived here. I just turned 45. How about that? I'm 45 years old. It's going by quick. We're getting old. So we have a short time. I have kids. I have grandkids. Do you? Do you have kids and grandkids? Because we're at a period now where we have a short time left to be able to save our country, or to even do anything to resist the downfall of America. And I don't know how it goes for you, but I'm not one to sit and idly by, waiting to vote someday that might never come. While we're already being warned left and right that the Chinese are getting ready to do a massive cyber attack on us. And we've been calling that for a long time. It's the blackout, guys. The blackout is coming. And when Christopher Wray comes out and says that, he's spilling the beans ahead of time that there's going to be a massive strike against America's cyber infrastructure. And he's over there running around trying to enforce transgender politics and transgender perverted pedophilic sex ideation to kids. That's what Christopher Wray does all day. He tries to make sure the border stays wide open and that the America's actual sovereignty is being raped consistently every day, every minute, every hour, all day long. That's what Christopher Wray's main job. His job is to chase me and you around because we might vote for Trump, right? Because we don't like Biden. We don't like Ashley Biden's disgusting diary. We don't like Hunter Biden's disgusting incest pornographer, award-winning guy of the year, right? Disgusting, disgustoid pigs. Let's just get it out there. Let's just make it what it is. Let's just stop beating around the bushes, right? This shit is totally out of control. These people have got to be, all the Marines around them, you've got to stop saluting. Why? Why open the door and salute? What are they going to replace you with the next guy? The next guy. Don't open the door, don't salute. It's time to just stop dignifying this. Stop playing along. Stop bringing our children over to this, right? To this individual, this disgusting, pedophilic slob, this horrible monster. This pig monster, this swamp creature, Biden, right? I mean, we can't say enough to literally bring this guy's wretched tyranny over America to an end as soon as possible. And a legal, hopefully legal mechanism of the Republican Democratic process of us voting him away, right? But look, if there was ever going to be a time when somebody was going to destroy America and destroy America's voting. We've had all these cycles of voting for the president every 4 years. If that was ever going to be interrupted and destroyed, it would be now. With Biden, the whole Barry Sartoro Davis. What the fuck? What kind of fucking freaks are these? Sorry, I'm starting to panic a little bit there. But and then they're bringing out Big Mike, right? I mean, I don't know about you guys, but we have had a whiplash in America. We have had our heads turned around in such an extreme way over the last few years because their eyes have been opened and they're awakening to the truth that these degenerate pedophile pigs are starting to take over our country, right? There was a time when you and I, right, I thought there was a difference between George Bush, that skull and bones traitor, and he's been really quiet lately, just hanging out in the back. Maybe he's chopping down some brush and chopping down some trees, doing some landscaping back in Waco, right? What a backstabbing skull and bones cunt that guy is, right? And of course, it looks like to me that they were something with 9/11 inside job, all that. It's so easy to see now. It becomes so clear. And you can see how the Obama-Clinton initiative is all one big tag team with the Bushes, and they're trying to maintain the past control over the system of America's democratic republic, right? Republican democracy. constitutional democratic systems of a republic, or whatever, man. It was the genius of our founders who had left the old world of absolute, total, arbitrary control by the aristocracy and the papal knights and the system of nobility by which the divine right of kings, right, had absolute dominion over the lands, and the people were nothing but persons, right? They were just little serfs. They were nothings. And they were burned at the stake, right? They were killed. They were called heretics, and the deep, galvanizing, horrifying human abuse of centuries of inquisition and terror and human atrocity. Think about it. Some of these fucking idiots think they have PTSD. You don't know what deeply ingrained generational trauma is. You're fools. But as a response, as we said before, to the Protestant Reformation and to the people receiving the light of the scriptures in the Bible, and people trying to find a place where they could be free and have time to complete a thought, right, and have more than a moment to think between all the constant barrage and impoverishing cycles of Roman holidays that we have here now erected in America again. Follows right along with Europe, all the European carnivals, all the Ishtar, Easter egg bullshit, all that is all from Europe. And it's sad because we were free from it for a long time. And America had a moment of religious freedom, right? Talked about the Edict of Nantes, right? The American Constitution was established to be sure that citizens had the rights to protect themselves, to be informed with a free press, to speak freely, and to read their Bible and to read their other books freely. And it became the greatest nation in world history because of that reason. And we're going backwards because of that exact same reason, is because we're giving ourselves over to this ridiculous abomination of Roman idolatry. And everyone puts the wreaths up, and we're losing the culture war in the sense that we've forgotten what religion is, and we forgot what we were protesting against in the Roman tyranny. And we forgot our protestare. We forgot that we were pro-testament. We forgot that we had our book of God, our oracle, and the testaments of God to guide us. And now people don't read anymore. They don't have any of that. They just want pornography and disgusting, reprobate, sickening perversion in the classrooms in front of little kids, right? That's all they have. That's the only use they have for books now. And oh God, if you try to take out the pornography out of the kids' library, you're a book burner. That's the kind of twisted and sickening, effed up place we've arrived at in America, where now it's time to take the gloves off, guys. Got to think about the gangs of New York. Just think about it instead of locally, expand it out regionally. Think big. We have to defend our kids, and we have to stop being imbibed with and have our minds, blinded with the psyops and the kind of systematic use of language and propaganda mechanisms and linguistic devices and controlling ways of Marxist tactics by which the DEI, black racial supremacy ideology that has been coming out, we've got to just resist it. And we've got to stop worrying about what people are going to say. And you're going to be called a racist if you don't like going on with black supremacy in America as some kind of political device. You're going to be called a racist. If you don't want to get down like that one disgusting lady who keeps showing it on Twitter X constantly. Maybe it's me, right? Maybe the algorithm is just feeding back to me what I'm trying to not see or what I'm trying to reject or something, right? But I'm just kind of over that period. But I don't think America is over that period of just everyone wanting to debase themselves and having forgot what they are, where they came from, or what this America is all about, or their own ancestry, because we've all been descended into this idea of a black and a white. Does a black and a white have any kind of ancestry or kind of historical ethnicity or some kind of national heritage? I see these guys who are coming in from Africa, sweet, polite, gentlemen, not like some of the people you might see acting completely insane across Europe, right? But well-behaved, kind of well-educated individuals. And the only reason that they're from Africa recently is because they have their accent still, right? And they know what Africa is, and they know where they're from in Africa, and they know who they are, and they're not just a black, right? They probably speak Afrikaans. They got some kind of actual connection to their own heritage and history. And I don't think we over here in America, we're being descended into this divisive, racialist narrative and this occult system of brainwash over our minds, this black and white methodology of oppositional thinking that has us kind of at a loss because we can't understand ourselves anymore, what we are as Americans. Because there's Black History Month. You have to kind of reject Black History Month to kind of preserve the humanity that is America's history, to do with the people whose ancestors are from the sub-Saharan slave trade historically here in America. We have to be able, in order to understand all that, actual nuances of people's actual heredity and their actual historical legacy, we have to put away this idea of blacks and whites, right? Recently, Ireland was blowing up. Probably you people out there on Facebook and who watch the news media or whatever have no idea what's really going on in the world, so let somebody else tell you. But of course, you might not have been aware that Ireland was exploding with riots and issues over having so many illegal immigrants pouring into their country from Sharia-compliant nations who expect everywhere they go that people are going to be Sharia-compliant. When they're not, they stab little kids in the neck at the school playground or something, right? And everyone goes completely apeshit. And of course, trending for several weeks was Irish Lives Matter. And of course, Irish lives matter. And people in Ireland still remember that they're Irish. Okay, so they're not like broke down into this kind of dismal and perverse way of thinking of themselves as white. Because they're not whites. That's stupid as fuck. That's Freemason thought. That's some like Ku Klux Klan thought, right? White fountains and colored fountains. And now we got the total full dialectic in place, white and black, right? We're not whites and blacks, guys. We better figure that out real quick. If we can't figure that out and understand that and get ourselves out of that mindset and that way of thinking and talking and speaking and describing ourselves, right? If you let Black History Month apply to you, then someone else over there is going to let White History Month apply to them. And we're going down the fucking tube with that. It's ridiculous. We are Americans, right? There's 200 nations in the world practically. And we have Americans in America who are fully American, who are probably from every single one of those nations. And we cannot allow ourselves to be broken down into this fragmentary dissolution of identity and thought and just make ourselves into some kind of Freemason tile floor where they walk on the chaos energies, right? When they go into their Freemason hall and they got the black and white tiles on the floor. And they walk on the tiles, and if you read up on it, the tiles represent chaos, right? That's what we are. We are chaos. We're blacks and whites. We're just simply being set up in this grand architecture, in this occult design for the total destruction of America's foundations. And you have to understand that 9/11 strike in New York City was just ultimately a symbolic representation of what their ultimate end and their ultimate goal is for America entirely, guys. So that's why I said, in order to kind of be able to be united in these United States, in order to kind of go through the crucible that we have to go through in order to, somebody has got to deal with the crime in Chicago. Somebody somewhere is going to have to deal with the violence of, right? Ultimately, if it isn't dealt with, and that's what the FBI, I mean, they actually exist to do this work rather than chasing political partisans around the country and planting fake bombs. Is everybody aware of the fake bomb planting? It should be known that they used like one of their own inside little training, pretend training devices. It's like a dummy device, right? And they left it over there to be found by themselves, and it was left by themselves. And they're a bunch of degenerate traitors, man. And if they will not come out and openly say it, they're all in it together. They got some whistleblowers. Yeah, but, and that's tough. But you know what they need? You need 50 or 60 people to step out all at once and tell the story of what's going on and just get it on the record. And of course, there's probably nowhere there for them to land, right? There's nowhere for them to go. There's no out. But you know what, guys? You're on the hook for the whole thing. Historically, I'm sure you're riding high. And that Gestapo, Fourth Reich power hard on you guys have. I'm sure that's working for you. Go get your hair cut, shaved real tight this week. Go polish your pistols and shit. You can feel badass for a while, but ultimately that Nuremberg fucking trial shit's coming. It's going to come. As sure as the day is long. It's just how it works. It's just how things are. You can feel it coming. Everybody can feel it coming. There's going to be ultimate rectifier. And who knows what kind of Oliver Cromwell extremity will come into place to bring it back around and right things. But like we said, we were always talking about the Council on Foreign Relations. Let's talk about the Council on National Policy. The CNP, right? Nobody talks about that. The Council for National Policy they're weighing in. They have something to say about America's future. And we have a lot of rabble in the streets, a lot of rabble rousers, a lot of Bolshevik little Stalinists running around, right? Trying to stir shit up. A lot of black supremacists trying to get everyone to get down on the ground and kiss their boot or something. We have got issues in America, and we're not going to be able to reflect upon our own melanin content and our own skin color. We need to reflect upon the law. People do not have rights to violate other people's rights, right? And then we have, on top of that, we have tens and tens of millions of illegal immigrants who are probably the worst kind. I think before maybe we had people who were just looking for jobs. Now they're finding and bringing in massive caravans, massive tranches of millions of folks who are just absolutely going to add to the insanity of this country to a magnitude of 100, right? To a power of 10 of chaos and anarchy is being laid in front of us. And we're going to have to sort through it, right? It's going to have to be sorted through. I'm so sorry for people's astonishment and their disappointment when they no longer have the ability to live in these cities, and there's no food stamp benefit for them to suckle off the system anymore, and they're going to just burn their own neighborhoods to the ground, and a lot of people are going to get hurt. A lot of people are going to perish. And the whole mantra of Black Lives Matter, that will be used up. I'm telling you guys, they used up that little ideological cover that people might have actually used in the future and be like, look, this is a disgrace what's happening to these people over here. These lives matter. I'm telling you, people are going to be so sick of that phrase having been abused, and all the Black Lives Matter individuals who made millions and bought all the mansions and just took all the money away and robbed the whole thing, right? And then you have Fannie Willis over there, and she's a total disgrace and a pervert, right? And she just needs to step down, but she's going to just keep trying to ride high on the hog, keep on trying to prosecute. These individuals are being set up and they cannot see it. God help these people. So that's what we need to pray, because God help them, because they're being set up to go into the grinder here. So these individuals in the street, all these people running around doing all the shootings in Chicago, I'm telling you, they're going to go through and they're going to Jade Helm the fuck out of it. I'm telling you right now. So just so you know, just so it's on the record and we can go back and look and be like, well, dang, like they're going to go ahead and use this opportunity and all this crisis and all this chaos in this country to do the mass roundups, right? And it's just going to be passed from one. It reminds me of the Trail of Tears, right? It goes from someone who's trying to set it up correctly, and it goes to another guy who just lets it go to shit, and a bunch of people die. A bunch of Indians, American natives, just totally perished in the most brutal way imaginable, because of situations like just what we're going in right now, and that is that this extreme violence and all these the intrusion of this mass, it's traitors. They're traitors, right? Mayorkas, all them up, they're all traitors. At the DOJ, they're traitors, right? They're allowing this to happen, and they can't go down to a few assistants below and be like, well, it wasn't really me. They signed the papers and I had to do it. No, you're all a bunch of traitors who are letting this happen to America, right? So that they love to throw those people into the grinder too later on and just let it be sussed out later. So it's going to go into this extreme imbalance, and in order to correct it, that's what I'm saying. That's what we were talking about all along. The right-wing reactionary extremism is going to be, beyond what people, I think, are imagining now. Okay? So, and it's not that I'm a Democrat or a Republican or any of that. Those kind of concepts, the right versus left paradigm, is just like the black and white paradigm. It doesn't help us in the end. Of course, when it comes down to the ballot, I have to try to nudge America in the right direction. I cannot vote for Biden. I have to put my faith in what I'm seeing from Trump, that we're going to go the right way. But at the same time, it's already been shown that Trump and Biden cannot control the system. They cannot control the empire. They cannot tell these different departments and black budget operations what to do and expect to be listened to, right? Even when they set up even when they send Bill Barr in, I mean, they have their own little fiefdoms and they start to do what they want. And they have their own pressures on them. Maybe they pull out pictures from the past. They're embarrassing. Everyone gets scared, right? I mean, it's a control system of blackmail and intrigue in Washington, D.C., and it's a total mess, right? And of course, it's affecting every other living soul in America. We're all suffering because of these nitwits up there that are sitting in the halls of power there and who are just serving their own banal interests and their own lining their own disgusting pockets. It reminds me of the guy up in the Senate getting butt plugged by one of the senators, right? That's why no one wants to talk about it, right? So they're just a bunch of disgusting worms. And of course, they're going to try to crush us like bugs, because that's what those disgusting, tyrannical, filthy despots would do. Right? That's exactly what they would do. That's all they can do, is try to lash out, get us all killed so that they can stay up there butt humping in the Senate chamber, right? So the guy can go punch the button on the wall and cause a fucking crisis alarm, inside the Capitol building to mess up a bill when he doesn't want. They all can just go do, Kamala Harris can go up there just showing her ugly face. I mean, she is like a low-level prostitute call girl. Her mouth is she's a blowjobber, right? A professional blowjobber from back in California with the governor. And then she's up there running her fucking mouth to us. I don't even want to see the lady's face move. Put your mask back on, please, right? Disgusting. Totally disgusting. So I hope you can kind of feel the vehemence of my particular attitude towards it. So here, let's play this awesome clip. I know you're going to love it.
A big warning on Capitol Hill yesterday from FBI Director Christopher Wray about possible hacking attacks by the Chinese government. He said China could target our infrastructure, causing potentially catastrophic damage. Nicole Skanga has more now from Washington.
China has shown it will make us pay.
FBI Director Christopher Wray delivered this warning on Capitol Hill.
China's hackers are positioning on American infrastructure in preparation to wreak havoc and cause real-world harm to American citizens.
Cautioning Chinese hackers are aiming to infiltrate the nation's pipelines, water treatment plants, transportation system, and even the...
Okay, I want to bring in Chris Hort. Chris Wray went up there, and of course in the war room we've been talking about this for years, but it's another thing to see the head of the FBI director. He warned our nation's lawmakers that the mortal enemy of the American people, the Chinese Communist Party, is planning on, with hackers, to have essentially a cyber Pearl Harbor to take down, before any type of kinetic war, to take down the infrastructure of the country. Now, you've been on here for the last couple of years warning people, whether it's generators or satellite phones, say, hey, right now you have the elements, you have all this, but you also have hackers. Now we have the FBI director on his most important testimony he's given, right, to say, with no caveats, there is the preparation for a cyber Pearl Harbor by the greatest enemy the United States has ever had. So I want to toss it to you. How are people then, because now you can't say, oh, it's Bannon and these wingnut conspiracy theory guys and the My Patriot Supply guys and Chris Hort, the satellite phone store. This is the FBI telling you that Chinese Communist Party is planning right now and working on the opening salvo of a cyber hacker Pearl Harbor. How do you think people should respond to this, Chris?
Well, Steve, I mean, you've been talking about this for years, and so have we. It's like there is a real and ongoing threat from the Chinese. They definitely have been targeting and continue to target all of our major infrastructure, including the power networks, the water supply, the communications networks, and they are having success. And look, I mean, we are fighting back, of course, but I think the lesson here, Steve, is that it is on us to be prepared, because the government can only do so much. And who do we trust more? I trust myself more to be prepared than someone to look out for me. And so what we do at sat123.com is we provide you with the communications that the federal government and the U.S. military uses, the satellite phone networks. If you have a satellite phone, you're going to have a much better chance of being able to stay in communication with your friends, family, loved ones, and colleagues in this kind of attack, because these networks are very well protected because they are used by the U.S. military and the federal government. So we have sat phones for free today at sat123.com, or you can call us at 941-955-1020. That's free phones with activation. We also have generators up to $600-700 off today, so you can make sure that you have power if the worst happens. And Steve, yeah, look, a lot of people say, we're fear-mongering and this and that. It's like, no, this is very real. So please, be prepared, and we can help you at sat123.com. We can help you stay in communication with a satellite phone that doesn't require the power grid local cell towers to operate. And we can provide you with generators to keep the power on when the power grid, or if the power grid goes down. We've got portable solar power generators for you, Steve, sat123.com, or call 941-955-1020. But we've been through this before. When these things happen, demand goes through the roof, and we've been seeing that since Christopher Wray testified in front of Congress this week.
Okay, I want to go, it's not fear-mongering. Wray was, and I'm not a Wray fan, but I know this area very well. It's the reason they brought me in for the laptop from hell. I'm the only civilian in the history of this country ever to be fully sanctioned by the Chinese Communist Party. It happened 2 minutes or 1 minute into the Biden regime back in January 20th of 2021. So I know this neighborhood very well. It was very compelling testimony. He laid out the case, and he laid out the case for the American people so that later you can't come back and say, I didn't know about this. This is the key point. This is why I wanted to have Horror on today, and we're going to try to get Chris on tomorrow morning also, because I need this audience to hear it.
That's right. It's now time for a word from our awesome sponsor, Wendy's Boutique Limited. Wendy'sLimited.com. And Wendy'sLimited.com is offering the hottest new designer trends and brand name couture fashion styles. So you have to hear about Wendy's Boutique. Wendy'sLimited.com. Wendy'sLimited.com now has designer women's apparel and fine jewelry, sexy boutique fashions, very best prices online. And you know that at Wendy'sLimited.com, they know what a woman is, what a woman really is, right? So if you're a beautiful woman, or if you know a beautiful woman, and if you don't, stop listening to this show, okay? Right now, just stop. But if you happen to know a beautiful woman, and you are a beautiful woman, you have to know about Wendy'sLimited.com. So these are the sexiest boutique fashions anywhere, very best prices online, beautiful luxury products, guaranteed authentic, guaranteed, no Chinese knockoffs ever. So this is the real deal. This is the real, the legit, best prices, hottest couture gear, fragrances. We had Tom Ford shades, great deal on the Tom Ford shades. Everybody loves Tom Ford shades. So you can expect to find Gucci apparel, Hermes shoes, Prada jewelry, all at Wendy'sLimited.com. And you got to remember, Wendy'sLimited.com is really now famous for canceling Balenciaga when it mattered, right? So we're not having any of that over here. This is a woman-owned enterprise, all-American, family-run organization. Wendy'sLimited.com. Wendy'sLimited.com. You got to come join the craze. Hottest new designer trends, guys. Wendy's Boutique Limited. We need your support. And she's been courageous to support the show. Wendy'sLimited.com.
So I wonder, by show of hands, how many of us are going to get caught when the blackout hits with no satellite phone, right? We got to call Chris Orr, I guess. I'm desperate to do it, but I mean, I'm just so strapped for finances. The Biden economy is literally eating me alive. But, the supporters from the show have been really generous. And the real support for Wendy'sLimited.com has been really incredible. So Wendy's Boutique Limited, you guys have been really showing up over there. And, you kind of been like, swamping her with another level of business that she hasn't been used to in quite a while. So it's keeping her really busy. I appreciate that. I appreciate the show of love over there, and hopefully we don't get caught without our satellite phones, and the ability to have generators so we can charge and actually use them. Because after the blackout hits, after 24 hours, all these devices start turning off, and no one can use their wonderful smartphones anymore, right? So that's what this is all about. This is about beating the Darwinian door prize. We don't want to become awarded the stupid prizes that we get for playing the stupid games of believing that these cellular networks are going to be there for us and available for us to use in the future, and they're not just going to make us mass victims if we depend on them. And I think that we have to learn now how interesting it is that the explosion of this knowledge of Christopher Wray coming out and having to admit openly that, of course, the threat level and the terrorist threat level is through the roof, and there's really no doubt about it. We can't deny on any level that America is facing a future peril that it's never seen before because of Christopher Wray's own government, right? And his inability to do anything like a real man would do, and to step up and to make something happen there. Of course, they're just being eaten alive by top-down DEI policies right there at the FBI. The diversity, inclusion, perversion, and sycophantic worship of everything homosexual and everything deviant too. So that just opens the door for everything perverse, right? Everything pedophilic and everything debased in the world comes in the door. And of course, you can't have anything moral or American or anything with any Christian cultural characteristics if you have that debasement and that destruction of the marriage covenant and the nuclear family. But let's go into one more little quick point that we were just observing here. Owen Schroyer is back, and he did his heroic stint suffering for us all on the cross of the persecution of American Department of Injustice. And it's sad he's a forerunner in that. Other people are going to go through the crucible. Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, of course, will have to go and suffer the same persecution and the same crucible. And I think it's good. I've been to jail. I think, you have to kind of ignore all the riffraff and the other morons that are in there that you're surrounded by, that you're forced to be around, which is the most difficult part. But with that aside, it's a time for reflective quiet, if you can get it. And it's time for reading, and it's time to cut off all the modernity and the outside noises of Wi-Fi signals and buzzing phones, and get a really good feel for just how long the day is. And this is a good thing. This is a refreshing of your soul. This is a time to go into the monastic, to go into the cloistered embrace of some real inward development, some inward thought. You can complete a single thought. You can really have time to look at you'll hear from the outside what's going on, but you'll have this time of being. You have to use this time. You know what I mean? It has to be productive time. You can't let this time go by. There's a misery factor, but not really, because we're men, right? And we understand what's going on out there, and we're driven hard by the goal and the cause, and the persecution. This isn't straight up like you're stole the granny's purse and you're going to suffer your penalty. This is all of our minds and hearts and thoughts are with you, and you're carrying on the struggle for a greater good and a truly greater cause. And you should be reflecting with God, with your Bible, and you'll come out like Samson, right? You'll come out like a powerhouse, and that's what we need. So anyway, going on from there, we have to just take a listen to Owen Schroyer's comments, and we'll listen to his, because he's talking about how the sheriffs are going to respond to this. And they're going to come out and have a response to Christopher Wray's disclosures behind closed doors.
Infowarsstore.com, we've got the best options. Emergency food supplies. Emergency food supplies. In fact, I'll tell you the most dangerous thing about Joe Biden right now. And this is kind of where I'm at, because I get asked a lot, well, who are the Democrats going to run, right? It can't be Joe Biden. Well, I still think it's Joe Biden right now. Now, remember, there's going to be a lot that happens between now and November, a lot that happens in the next 268 days before the presidential election. So who knows what's going to happen? But right now, it's Joe Biden as far as we know. Now, the most dangerous thing about Joe Biden is that now the deep state and the Democrats view him as a lame duck president. So they will commit atrocities. They will crash economies. They'll open the border. They'll start multiple wars, all in the name of Joe Biden, because it doesn't do anything to his reputation. It's already destroyed. It doesn't do anything to his legacy. It's already destroyed. It doesn't hurt this administration because it's lame duck. They're not coming back. So that's the biggest danger of Joe Biden, that him being viewed as a lame duck president means we're going to go through all kinds of hell. Joe Biden will get blamed for it. And everybody will just blame Joe Biden, still not understanding the deep state or the powers and the players that control him. So you might want to get some emergency storable food. This is definitely the next 268 days of Joe Biden's presidency are the most probably volatile, dangerous times in our lives, potentially. I mean, we've got sheriffs that broke from a meeting with Christopher Wray last week, and they came out and made public statements saying Christopher Wray has told us that this is the highest terror level, higher than 9/11, because of the open border. And of course it is. They don't know who's coming across. So, again, this is just, it's volatile, folks. You want storable food supplies, at least a month or two. You don't want to be in a situation where you can't get food. You'd rather have storable food supplies and not need it than need it and not have it. I think we can all agree with that.
So yeah, I recommend that we take the advice of the individuals that are around us, that are making presenting some of these, the focal point of what's really kind of come about here. And yeah, I'm going to go over there and try to get the Iridium phone and try to be ready for that and be prepared to deal with it when these cell networks get interrupted. And, it's going to get, there's no sense in setting ourselves up when we have time now to prepare and to be ready. So as we're going forward here, it's crucial that we recognize that, as it's been true for every other generation of Americans, we are holding in our own hands the future outcome and the political destiny of our nation, because we are, as the people, all together corporately, we are the sovereignty, right? We are the ultimate figurehead and the designated authority in this country. So the whole process of attacking the people and breaking us down into different divided groups, running these Marxian psyops and this politics of division and these demagogic paradigms of like black and white racial theory, right? And then hitting us with this critical racial stuff, which just takes advantage of all that mindset and that pre-laid demoralization and breakdown of the American populace and its own identity. So it's just an attack on the people, and it's a deranging and a skewing of the perceptions and mindset and belief of the people. And now it's just outright demoralization and debauching and perverting, wholesale systematic perversion and degeneration of the youth before they even are of age of consent, before they can even, like we said, before they can even, get a driver's license. They already have these young kids, pre-puberty kids, all like sucked into, these little victims, sucked into their little adult world. It's the perverse and sickening molestation of the kids and the grooming of them before you even get into where you're like nip tucking their testicles away or whatever they do. I'm not an expert on how they somehow surgically alter these people. And then later on, when they're 20, they just wake up suddenly to the life of decisions that the adult world has led them along this primrose path, this deluded idea, and ruin their bodies in this extraordinary way. And it's just a lifetime of regret. Can you imagine when you were 7 being given the choice to press a button that would alter your life for the rest of your life, and then having to, that's what this is all about, guys. These people are so disgusting, and they're hiding under the guise of academia and teachers and trusted people, right? Trusted reporters, they're mandated reporters. If they see any kind of abuse, they got to run and call right away. And so what they mean by that now is that if the parents are going to try to stop them from transitioning and perverting these young people's minds, it's totally, completely horrific, and it's horrific and shameful. And of course, we have issues too, of course, with abortion. Even though the Supreme Court did its little fictional magic trick with the Roe versus Wade situation, it seems that abortion is still prevalent all across the entire nation, and we'll always be having this systematic sacrificial child bloodletting until we decide as a nation to wipe it out, to extinguish it from existing. Unless a woman was forcibly raped, or, however that could be defined, or she was the victim of child abuse or incest, certain situations, obviously, it's like a 0.8%, 0.8% of all instances of pregnancy. And so we'll have to, as a people, as a nation, take responsibility for our genitals and for our procreative, generative power in our loins. And when we go out and we bang and we have kids, we have a pregnancy, we're not going to just kill the human, right? That's not going to be the answer. And there'll be a time when we'll look back on ourselves like this is some kind of fucking dark ages. Like this is some kind of, fucking dungeon. And then if you nitwits can't relate, just go and watch, think Princess Bride, right? Go down into the dungeon on the rack. That's what they'll think. That's what they'll think about this period of time when all these women were carrying around signs of ban white men. What the hell? We'll see if they're saying that soon. We'll revisit that whole topic in 24 months, and we'll go and just talk about that again, and see how rational that idea is. Get rid of all the individuals who are the people who are the military and the police and the jail guards and the responsible citizens, the prison security system, right? The border apparatus, the entire system of American institutional sovereignty and integrity, requires an entire 10,000 year history of men who arrived to this place where they could all be fighting over the spoils of American hegemony and American supremacy in the world. And that's exactly what you got here, is you have the enthrallment of the institutional capture of these neo-Marxist radicals. And, these individuals like Barry Davis Sartoro or whatever, Big Mike, Obama, all these individuals, the Biden-Obama clan, the sickening topple of American independence and respect around the world, starting with Afghanistan and the total horrifying debacle that just took place right there. It's just one Benghazi disaster after another. And it's just like Victoria Nuland with Ukraine. It's just a new Benghazi disaster, right? They're over there trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and maybe take President Zelensky over some new pallets of cocaine or whatever. Maybe he'll just end up eating it right soon. You know what I mean? I think there's going to be some major upheavals. I think we can see that these individuals are going to try to wrestle back the total, right? They're totally obsessed and enthralled to the ring of power, right? They're just going to do anything to anyone, anytime, and try to get the different intelligence agencies, the FBI to go along with it, right? And so I think that's the warning that you're hearing coming from Chris Wray, is that basically this is going to happen. The blackout will hit, the systems will go down, and they're going to basically, this is an election year, and they're not going to have an election, right? They're not going to. So these are the warnings you get ahead of time, because after they do a blackout and everything blinks out, they can't really explain what happened, so they have to explain it ahead of time. Maybe we'll have a Simpsons episode, Maybe we'll have a revelation of the method, or how many of them have we had? We better go brush up on our Amazon episodes over there and see what they're going to tell us soon. How New York will look when it's dead city, when it's walking dead, right? I mean, you can see it hitting. All these people are being poured in the country. These people have no idea what they're doing here. They're ranging around, causing total chaos throughout the society, trying to, pick fights with local denizens in Chicago, or they're trying to shoplift in Philadelphia and getting beat up, or they're up there beating up the cops in New York and then fleeing to California, and everyone wants to deport them. The pandemonium and the hellscape has just begun. It's just begun. So here we go. So now later on, when there's no way to get your fucking thing to connect, and your whole way of life is ruined in a Wi-Fi whisper, right? And it's gone, it's done, and you're just looking around as the food in your fridge and your freezers are going to start to rot, the power's out, you know what I mean? No one's going to explain anything to you. There's going to be no explanation, and you're just going to have this gauntlet survival struggle that will go on, because everyone in the vicinity, these people are packed together in cities, packed together very tightly, even in the upper crust areas with the 3-story homes, and they get the 1.2 acre little snippet, little parcel on their spot, right? And then they have the nicer homes, but they're all packed together, and no one's going to be able to all just drive. Look what happened in Maui. No one's going to be able to all just drive out at one time and just leave, right? It's a total nightmare. And I think that we're facing that. I think that the awareness of that is heightening as the drama unfolds on the Texas border, as the state of Texas, the Republic of Texas, the nation of Texas, the sovereign nation, independent nation, own constitution, tries to take control of its border from the drug cartels and for this United Nations World Economic Forum conspiracy to implode America's culture and society with this horrific, atrocious invasion. And now it's a forceful invasion. Before, the people could be said that they were just ignorant and unaware, but now it's a forceful, ramrodding, raping, and trespassing of America's sovereignty with full consciousness that they're doing. They know people don't want it. They know that Texas is trying to stop it. They know that it's illegal, and they know that some places in America controversially are allowing them to be there. They know that there's somewhere that they really shouldn't be. They know that they're stepping their toe inside the big bear trap. They know it. So it's more cannon fodder, guys. It's more cannon fodder. What I'm warning against from what is coming, it's very clear that the roundups are going to come. They're going to go ahead and try to clear all these people out. And in the middle of that, there's going to be a lot of upheaval. There's going to be a lot of upturning and overturning of things here. It's going to get horrifying. There's going to be a vulcanization, a balkanization, right? Let me go get with Victoria Nuland. Maybe she can explain to me the nuances and the linguistic subtleties of the differences there. So the breaking up and the fracturing of America into these pieces where we have these Kathy Hochul's. What a disgusting wretch. Just like Governor Whitmer over there. What a horrifying and depraved little effing monster, right? How many World Economic Forum, how many times did she go sit on Santa Claus's lap over there? They're disgusting. It's disgusting beyond belief. And these people are scared beyond, out of their wits to even have anything to say about it. I mean, we have entire counties and sheriff's associations and police boards, and everybody in the entire state of New York just gets behind Kathy Hochul and just salutes and then goose steps to whatever she says. No one says, wait, we're not doing this. No men, no testicular fortitude to stand up and say, look, this is insane. We're not doing this. This is not happening. Right? When does the civility resist? When does the police state, the martial power and the force of the law enforcement killers, when do they recognize that it's time to let the civility resist? Because they need to resist. And we're not going to enforce tyrannical laws over these people. And you have to be the police. That has to be the governor, and these have to be the people. And you know what? The police need to just do what the fuck needs to be done. So I don't know if there's no thinking there. I don't know how sickening and corrupt it is. I don't know how far gone it is. I don't know. Maybe we can ask Elon Musk. Maybe we can look in his networks and look at his algorithms and just see the impulses and the eye movements and the interactions of people, and just give us a demographic breakdown of how fucked we are. But the truth is that we have to resist. It doesn't matter. We have to be like George Washington in the middle of the night, rolling out the cannons, and then we're just all thinking, this is fucking crazy. But we fucking have to. We have to resist because our kids need to see us do it. Even if we go down into the grave and some unfortunate penury that we didn't expect and it wasn't our real destiny in life, we had to go take up this cause of justice and liberty in America once more, and not let these other people say they were terrorists. I mean, the British called them terrorists, our heroes. They tried to tear their statues down, but I still see them there. They're you know what I mean? Don't you just see them there? That Thomas Jefferson, all of them, they were terrorists once, I guess. That's what they were called. Sticks and stones, we'll break our bones, man. So as we carry on, we have to be true and honest to ourselves. The rest of the world is looking to us as Americans. They're looking to us. Okay, we have all these different views. You guys have heard all my different views. I'm listening to all your different views. Fascinating. The most fascinating, like watching Brett Weinstein go on there with Tucker Carlson. I mean, we're not just totally wrapped. I mean, the world, America is shifting and coalescing in this amazing way. All these people are influencing me. I don't know about you. Are you being influenced? Is this new consciousness being shaped, in you by all these individuals, as they sit there and talk, and we're all just it's almost like the internet is being what it could have been. It's being what its potential really is, instead of this chase for mass manipulation and psychological distortion of the society and the world. And we've got to take control of these tech companies, these IBMs and the Apple companies and so on. They can't be allowed to go around the world and sell their ubiquitous technological conquest to the highest bidder, right? You shouldn't be allowed to go into China and take America's most powerful technological tools and turn them into weapons against the people. You shouldn't be allowed to do it. Just pass a law in Congress right now. Get that doofus, the plumber guy, Harry Johnson or whatever, the speaker, to go over there and see if he can, put that together, right? That guy is crazy. I think that to him, Christianity means that you get down and vacillate like a worm in front of every person who comes along, right? And this is not my view of Christianity. That's just not how I look at it. That's not what I hear the Lord saying. That's not how I take the parables. That's not how I'm being instructed by the letters of Paul and Peter and all the apostles, who are all Jews, by the way. So if you think we're Christian Zionist nationalists or something, it's basically the deal. Go into look in Revelation, and it talks about that God preserves all the nations and kindreds and tongues and languages. So in heaven, forever. So I don't know what kind of weird, psychopathical nirvana Buddhist, idealism you have about what's about to happen after we leave here. But people who are, he's going to preserve the nations and the languages and the tribes and the peoples. That's Russian, right? All the different dialects. Swahili, right? So, God is going to do something that he wants to do, and it has something to do with what other people's expectations are about how it's going to be, right? So he lays it out, what he's going to do. It's just set in stone. It's just a matter of fact that he designed the nations. He separated the nations. If you go back and look in Genesis again, he was the one who decided to have these various languages put into place. It's another thing that these people can't explain. How if we all evolved from some organism, how there could be like 72 different language dialects, right? Latin, Cyrillic, Afrikaans, right? Gaelic. I mean, there's so many different language constructs that it defies reasoning because we're supposed to all come from one root source, right? So somewhere along the way, we're just moving along there through the Paleozoic era or something, right? We get up into the Stone Age, and then we're in the Bronze Age, and suddenly, all of a sudden, the people of the earth suddenly speak 42 different languages. All kinds of different written hieroglyphic languages all over the place. So, yeah, explain that to guys. Explain that kind of divergence and that fracturing of human development into so many different peoples, so many different languages, and so many different groups. So that was God's will. So the United Nations, they want to reverse God's will. They want to go and unite all the peoples back together again in some kind of Nimrod-like Atlantis, and it's, of course, you can see what's happening. It's the miry clay mixed with the rusting metals, right? The rusting iron. And it doesn't mix. It doesn't cohere. It doesn't go together. So for our point of view, we just have to recognize now that we have to survive as a people. We have to do and hear the warnings around us and recognize the data and the information that's coming to us and just prepare ourselves. I would like to see a world where we just go on for the next 10 months uninterrupted, move gracefully into a swift political decision where America comes to terms with what they want to do. The ballot is already set. Nikki Haley just needs bird brain. She just needs to blow away like the dust of history that she is. And we're going to have a vote between Biden and Trump. And the problem is how will they cheat? How will they get some new terror going about, oh my God, there's been an outbreak of Ebola, right? That's everyone is, they're giving out Ebola vaccines. They're trying to terrorize the people. They're going to do everything in their power, whatever they possibly can, to manipulate this election because there's going to be no accountability from here on out, right? They did it there in 2020. They're going to do it continuously, and they're going to make a systematic mechanism by which they control this democracy in America, and it'll be against, obviously, the best will and the best efforts of the people. So violence is never an option, guys, right? And it also ultimately is the most unproductive and internecine destructive outcome that politics and political decisions and political devices like democracy, like allowing everyone to have a vote and decide the big question by the will of the people, like that. When you start manipulating the chips as they fall into the bucket and you start to manipulate the outcome, then you've already brought violence into play. So the one who is introducing the violence is the one who is manipulating the outcome of elections, right? So the one who is introducing violence into the body politic are the ones who are denying the ability for the people to speak. The ones who are protecting those who are attacking the children of the people, right? In their own classrooms, like some kind of Hessian rapists who are allowed to just, forcibly stay in people's homes and end up raping the wife and children, right? That was the history of America's revolution. We're just facing the same kind of horrifying abuse, train of abuses. That's what we're looking at. We're looking at a train of abuses, guys. And we don't have to take that shit. And our whole document says we don't. And these people can get all the hollow point bullets they want, and they can just shoot a bunch of us. But you know what, guys? We're not going to take it, right? We're not going to take it. So, it's time for everyone to stop, sitting there like victims, waiting for our abusers and our victimizers to come in the dark of night like some kind of Inquisition, like some kind of Spanish Inquisition. You have to be kind of old like me to remember the old Saturday Night Live. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition, right? And they come in totally dressed in like looking like Darth Vader cardinal robes and shit. No one is going to expect it when they strike. No one's going to expect it. No one's going to expect it how it's going to go down. Their systems are going to be up. The people, their ability to talk and communicate online, all their businesses are going to be totally smashed. That's what Chris Wray's warning is. He's, what is he doing? Spending all of his time, going and busting in the door of James O'Keefe over Ashley Biden's diary, right? To hush hush, right? That's an exercise of the great and mighty power of the FBI. But, when it comes to like saving America from this coming blackout, right? We can expect, just like the bomb incident, we can expect that some disgusting, deviant, probably perverted, right? Debased actors, sexual deviants of some stripe. Who else? What other sickos could be so disgusting and so politically motivated as to like set a fake training bomb out at the Democrat offices when Kamala Harris was going to be swinging nearby there? And of course, you haven't heard a peep about it because they know it's going to be exposed. And, whatever political advantage they thought they would get out of like blaming and framing half of the people, 150 million people in the country with terrorism charges with a fake bomb that the FBI set. I mean, these people are insane. We can't trust them to be delivering justice properly, or to be using their weapons properly, or to be, supposedly operating as lawful officers of the law. We can't trust these people to come on our property. I'm not going to speak a single syllable to them. Not a word. Not a single. I have nothing to say. Don't put me in the presence of them. Get away from me. They are the new Gestapo, guys. And whatever laws or orders or pages in some book somewhere that they think gives them the authority to do this, I repudiate it. Simple as that. They don't have no authority. The Constitution is the law of the land. And whatever kind of amendments and adjustments and like prevarications and manipulations Georgetown University has set in those documents, I repudiate those. And there's no way that we're going to sit here as the American people and allow them to destroy our destiny, our future, and not for our kids without saying or doing a single thing about it. We have to act. And as a people, as our own people group, as the American people, we're not blacks and whites. We're people from all over the world. We have people from all different walks of life in America. We're not going to be broken down into this divisive and acidic and corroding ideological virus that these individuals over here are trying to saddle us with. We need to get our troops home. We don't need to be having our military spread across 85 nations or whatever whatever is going on there. We don't need them like rolling up and down and doing all this. We have our own energy here that they apparently capped off for the environment. And then we're just going to cart the fuel overseas on ships because that's better for the environment. I mean, this is ridiculous. This is ridiculous. This is profoundly deranged for us to sit here and carry on without doing everything in our power to resist. Okay? So that's what we're doing here. And I hope that that's what you're doing there. And like I said, I appreciate all the feedback. I appreciate you guys supporting the show and supporting our sponsors and doing everything that you do for us. And of course, about wendyslimited.com. wendyslimited.com is getting famous. You guys are making Wendy famous over here. I don't know what's going on. Your support has been incredible. She's been just doing everything in her effort to keep her stock and her items available and keep everything going. And it's a tough market out there for her. It's so brutal for women just to be women without having some kind of psychopath male, like big old dude coming in and, in heels and making everybody feel weird and basically sexually violating women with his mockery, right? It's a mockery. We're allowing these people to make a mockery of women. And so with wendyslimited.com, it's time to support women being women, right? You're not going to find the transgender models there. I think that they dispense with that. They dispense with Victoria's Secrets like we were talking about. Or I guess Victor's Secret, right? Just done with that. That is just a mockery of womanhood and just a total despising of everything, of all of human history and knowledge, right? And just to kind of bend into, concede to other people's mental illness is just, it's sickening for us to, as a people, to take part in that, and we shouldn't. So we're not going to. We have to find sponsors like wendyslimited.com who are going to continue to remain pure, right? Pure womanhood. No surprises, right? And we're going to continue to, let women go and go into a place where they can be women by themselves, right? Without any intruders or fake women or whatever's going on there. So once again, we thank you for your support.
So now it's time for a word from our sponsor. And as you know, our sponsor is courageously helping us to keep our show going here. So it's wendyslimited.com. wendyslimited.com. So wendyslimited.com. wendyslimited.com has all the hottest new styles and couture trends and latest boutique women's apparel and shoes and heels and flats and all kinds of just wonderful stuff. You have Hives and Honey jewelry armoire. It's been a favorite lately. And we have, of course, Windsor crystal lamps. I have one in stock in particular that has been a favorite. So wendyslimited.com is always open to help you get everything you need. Awesome Prada purse that we saw that Wendy's Limited just put up. So we have to think who out there wants to get incredible Prada fashion couture. That from what I hear, they're a favorite of many, many ladies out there, many women all over the place. In fact, I think you cannot find a single family member or wife or sister or aunt or grandmother or loved one or girlfriend or what have you that does not love Prada purses. So if you want to be totally awesome, you have to eventually come to grips with wendyslimited.com. Wendy's Boutique Limited has all the hottest new styles and latest women's apparel, everything you need to be totally awesome. If you're a woman or if you have a woman who's someone that you love. And of course, we all love women because they're just so awesome. That's why wendyslimited.com is so successful. So go check out Wendy's Boutique. wendyslimited.com is the only place to go. And we have to recommend, she's been totally 100% awesome to us and generous. So we are always going to be buying our jewelry, fine jewelry, gold and silver jewelry, and all of our best boutique, couture, and designer trends. We're going to go to wendyslimited.com. So check out Wendy's Boutique Limited.
Guys, the number one issue in the country, the border. And we now have this border bill that has come out of the Senate, apparently negotiated by McConnell, Senator Langford of Oklahoma, and the Democrats. And here to discuss this with me and also to talk about his new film, Nick Searcy. Nick Searcy, he's a famous American actor. He starred in dozens of movies and TV series. Of course, his greatest role in Police State. I hear you chuckling about that, Nick. You can follow him on X at YesNickSearcy. By the way, the documentary, the new one we're going to be talking about, Nick is the narrator. It's called America Invaded. We'll get to that. Nick, welcome. Thanks for joining me. And, we just got the details of this new border bill. Now, President Biden has been saying, I need to have this authority, give it to me, and I will spring into action to, and I can kind of see his enthusiasm because when you look at this bill, oh my gosh, it is a complete giveaway to the Democrats. Now, I know Senator Langford is defending it. He's saying, oh, no, we're not really going to be letting 5,000 people in a day. But do you see it the way I do, that this is just bad news? And to me, the real question is not even so much what's in the bill. We can go through that. But how would any Republican in his right mind come up with this or sign off on this?
No Republican in his right mind would support this, and anyone who does isn't really a Republican. By allowing
this, not much what's in the bill. We can go through that, but how would any Republican in his right mind come up with this or sign off on this?
No Republican in his right mind would support this, and anyone who does isn't really a Republican. By allowing 5,000 a day, what that means is that it's going to be more than that. That's just the baseline. And the other thing that I find totally ridiculous about it, and it happens so many times with these bills, is that they tie this bill to aid to Ukraine and aid to Israel. It's like those issues, they're not tied together. There's no reason to put them in the same bill, except that you're using this idea of border security to secure the unpopular funding for Ukraine and Israel.
I mean, isn't it true that in some ways there's a contradiction here? Because what are we doing? I mean, we're protecting Ukraine's border from Russia, right? Israel is trying to secure its borders from invasion, attack by Hamas. So other countries' borders evidently do matter to us. Because think about it. If we didn't care about Ukraine's border, then, hey, Putin, march on in. But we are securing Ukraine's border, and yet there is this brazen indifference to our own border. Now, I can sort of understand why the Democrats like this idea. I mean, the way I see it, they're like, okay, we don't mind destroying the country as long as we get a permanent hold of it. And so if we can alter the demographics of the country may be a mess, but it'll be our mess. We'll be the gang lords in charge of it. But let's turn again to the psychology of a guy like McConnell. Now, help me to, what sense do you make of this? I mean, to me, McConnell, for most of his career, has actually been pretty solidly conservative. I wouldn't call him a rhino. He's blocked some very bad things that have come down the pike in the past, and yet his behavior of late, to me, has been utterly inexplicable. Do you think that this is a guy who's just sort of lost it?
Well, it's mystifying. I mean, it makes you suspicious of, maybe he's compromised in some way. Maybe there's some other thing going on behind the scenes that we don't know about, because it doesn't make sense. It's not consistent with some of the things he's done in the past. And I think that in a lot of cases, that's true. I mean, I don't have any inside knowledge or anything, but it certainly seems like anybody that would support this, that claims to be a conservative, claims to be a Republican, claims to care about American integrity and voting integrity, would never support anything like this unless there was some other motive behind the scenes.
I mean, to me, it almost suggests a complete lack of knowledge of your own constituency. Now, you mentioned earlier this business about tying, here you go, you're $20 billion for border security, $14 billion for Israel, $60 billion to Ukraine. So right there, just the numbers show where the priorities are, and maybe that's the key to the answer. Maybe for McConnell, it's all about Ukraine. He doesn't even care about the border. He goes, if I have to use the border as a catapult to get more money to Ukraine, then this is a ruse to do that. I mean, that would perhaps make sense of what McConnell's motives are. The other guy that puzzles me, by the way, look at Langford. He's coming from Oklahoma, one of the most conservative states in the country. And now with the way that this immigration problem has metastasized throughout the country, it was a huge issue in Iowa. It's a huge issue in New Hampshire, places that normally aren't touched by the border. But this is such a problem, is so serious. Everybody's touched by it. How would a guy like Langford explain this madness to his own constituents?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's political suicide. I mean, he knows that this is going to cost him his seat in the Senate. So why would he support something like this, knowing that almost everybody in his state is against it? And I mean, going back to the Ukraine and Israel funding as well, they should have called this the Ukrainian border funding bill instead of, our border, because if the most of the money is going to the Ukraine, then, it's a sliver of it that goes to our border. It's not a mistake, Dinesh. This is being done deliberate. This is not incompetence. This is deliberate.
I mean, I think what supports that to me is the fact that Lankford and McConnell have known what is in the bill for weeks, if not for months, because they've been negotiating it. And they have very carefully prevented the details of this bill from getting out. Why? Yeah. Because they probably knew that it would cause a firestorm. So their idea was, let's be on the down low. Let's kind of do the little handshake with the Democrats. Then let's drop the bill at the last minute and try to rustle up an immediate vote. Now, I got to say, this is a case where the House does appear to be standing firm, which is to say, I see Mike Johnson, the leadership, Steve Scalise, one after the other, like, this is dead on arrival. This is not even going to be voted on in the House. They're not even going to bring it up, which is good news for us, because it means the bill is not going to become law, at least certainly not in anything like its current form. But I'm still mystified and disturbed by the fact that we have, I mean, I don't know right now if you had a vote in the Senate, 10 Republicans would have to vote for it. Would there be 10? I mean, I'm going to count the people I think would vote for it. I think Romney would vote for it. Probably John Cornyn of Texas would vote for it. We know Lankford would vote for it, and McConnell. That's 4 right there. Can they get to 10? I don't know. But the fact that we don't know is a very bad sign, because the level of betrayal by the Senate, by Republicans in the Senate, very disturbing.
Yeah. Well, it bolsters the argument that it's a uniparty, that there really is only one party. They just sort of adopt these labels in order to have debates on television and get some TV time, but they're not really very much difference between the parties.
I mean, I've resisted that, Nick, for the simple reason that we need to have something to fight against the bad guys with, right? And what do we have if not the Republican Party? So my view has tended to be our guys are lousy, but they're the lesser evil. Or to put it somewhat differently, they might submit out of timidity or cowardice, but they're not the malevolent forces driving this train, so to speak. We know that that's coming from the left. But see, here's Chuck Schumer, quote, "I have never worked more closely with Leader McConnell on any piece of legislation as we did on this." So that's got to mean that what came out of this is the joint product of Schumer and McConnell. And that alone, I think, is confirms the idea that we're dealing here with guys who are on our side who seem to be more closely aligned with the other side. I mean, that's I'm having trouble taking that fully on board.
Yeah, I think it may not even be that they align with the other side, but they align with the ruling class. They align with this idea that they are a class above the American people, and so they've got to preserve their positions because they're the smart ones. They're the ones that know how things work, and their value to the nation is so important that they have to preserve their position. And, one other thing that I saw this week was, I believe it was Senator Durbin on the Senate floor talking about how now if you are in the country illegally and you can pass a fitness test, you can join the military, which is really shows that that's the ultimate goal. They want to take these people that are coming across the border and make them citizens, make them people that can vote. And by putting them in the military, they're creating a military that has people in it that have no allegiance to America. They're not really even Americans, but they're going to put them in the military. It's very sinister. It's mystifying.
I mean, the extremism of the provisions in this bill. I mean, taxpayer-funded lawyers for illegals. Start right there. U.S. taxpayers asked to pay for attorneys for illegals. Number two, there are these emergency provisions that supposedly block immigration or block the illegals, but Biden has the unilateral authority to override them. So you got the guy who won't shut the border, and he has the unilateral authority to cancel the provisions of this exact bill if he feels like it. So this is beyond absurd. And I think it would be very demoralizing if this passes the Senate. It would be good to see it defeated in the Senate and then also killed in the House, because that would show that the Republican Party still has a modicum of sanity and a modicum of attachment to its voters. But are you confident that we'll defeat it in the Senate?
No, not really. I'm worried about the House too. I mean, it's such a slim majority in the House that it could, you peel off a couple of Republicans and it could pass. But the real problem with this bill is that it's completely unnecessary. Joe Biden could stop this tomorrow. All he has to do is rescind the executive orders that he put in place on his first day in office. He can close the border. He's got the power to do that. He doesn't need this bill. All of this is nonsense. All of it is theater. He could do it tomorrow.
When we come back, I want to ask Nick Searcy about his new film. It's called America Invaded, and it is about terrorism and the border. Director Nick Searcy, follow him on X at YesNickSearcy. The documentary film we're talking about is called America Invaded. It's about terrorism. It's also about the border. Nick, I mean, this could not be a more timely film. This issue is front and center. And yet the film itself isn't just about the border. It seems to be about a kind of nexus, a connection between the military, the terrorist threats abroad, and maybe those terrorist threats being brought home to America via the border. How would you summarize the theme of the film?
Well, it's really about the consequences of having an open border and the fact that we don't know who is coming across. And the film, it really goes in places that I wasn't expecting when I first saw it. I mean, Namrata Singh Gujral, who produced this film, she talks to a lot of parents of children who their children enlisted after 9/11 because of their love of the country, and they felt they wanted to fight in the war on terror and had lost their lives, lost limbs. And she continually asked the question, why should we expect America's youth to sacrifice their lives for this country when this country won't protect itself? They won't protect the border to keep the things that happened in Israel from happening here in America. And that's what the film really shows, is how there are terrorists from terrorist countries, coming across the border, and we don't know about it. And what are they going to do when they get here?
I mean, I remember right after 9/11, one of the consistent themes that was discussed was the fact that America needs to strike at the bad guys over there so that they won't be able to bring their bad behavior, their terrorism, over here. So that was part of the rationale for going to Afghanistan, even going to Iraq. It was sort of like, we got to go to the Middle East. We got to let the guys over there know that this is unacceptable, and we won't tolerate it over there, let alone over here. And what you're saying is that in an amazing turnabout, we are not even paying close attention to who's coming through the border. I mean, it would seem to be a fact, if you or I were a leader of Hamas, don't you think that we could easily get 1,000 people through the U.S. border, the exact number of people who were involved in the October 7 attacks in Israel? I mean, it's much harder to get through the Gaza checkpoints than to get through the southern border, isn't it?
Yes. Absolutely. And when you look at the footage that you see from the border, these are not families that are coming across the border. These are young military-age men that, that could potentially be enemies of the country, but we're not even vetting them. We don't know who they are. And that's the point. That's the point this film makes, is that these people could be incredibly dangerous to our country, and yet our officials are not even taking the time to find out who they are. And that's what brings up the point of, like, why are they doing this? And it goes back to what I was saying before. I think this is deliberate. This is not incompetence. Incompetence can't explain this. They are intentionally allowing this to happen.
I mean, I would reinforce that point by saying this. If I were Joe Biden, or if I were the Biden team, I'd say to myself, look, even if I want to let a bunch of illegals in, I want to make sure that terrorists don't get in, because guess what? If they do a major terrorist act in America, who's going to be blamed for it? Biden. Right? The administration is going to be blamed for it. So why would I be so reckless as to let these guys in, knowing that they may be plotting these attacks, which will then fall upon me? So what possible reasoning, what possible motive, even if you were going to be conspiratorial about it, why would Biden want this? Why would the Biden gang want this?
Well, I think they probably believe, rightly so, that they'd be protected by the media, and the media would say it was happening because the Republicans didn't pass the border bill.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's what they would. I mean, that's the level of propaganda we're dealing with, and you're quite right about that. So if that were to happen now, but even prior to the border bill, there was no border bill, and for the last 2 years, the administration has been looking the other way. I mean, you know about this fentanyl, there's child trafficking, there are potential, Chinese guys, Pakistani guys, Hezbollah guys coming over. We know Hezbollah has a presence in Mexico, for example. And so I guess there are some people who just go that the Biden regime wants to destroy the country. I mean, even for us who are very skeptical, it's a little difficult for us to take that idea and go, yeah, that's right. Could that be it?
Well, I think that too, the level of corruption in the Biden family is so high that they could be just being paid off. That it's beneficial to them to allow this to happen. And, the people that are paying off these politicians like Biden are America's enemies. So they're saying, if you want the money to keep flowing, you got to keep the money flowing to the Ukraine. We'll give this back to you. But, you have to allow this to happen, or else we're going to expose you. I mean, there could be blackmail going on. There could be all kinds of things happening behind the scenes. And it sounds like a bunch of conspiracy theories, but I don't see any other explanation for it, because it doesn't make sense. As you just said, why wouldn't a President Biden want to protect the border, to protect his reputation, if nothing else, from a terrorist attack that might occur here that would be blamed on him? The only explanation to me is that he has some ulterior motive.
I mean, my mind flashes back to the aftermath of World War II. You remember the Rosenbergs were executed for treason, treason with the Soviet Union. But I got to say, if what you say is true, these people are worse than the Rosenbergs. Because to sell out your country for cash to a foreign entity, I mean, the Rosenbergs were communists. They actually believed in the idealism, crazy though it is, of the Soviet Union. They were not motivated by money. They didn't do it for money. And so, all right, that's what they believed. But for someone to say, listen, I will put the lives of my fellow Americans in danger because somebody is slipping money in a suitcase under the table, I mean, to me, that is really the worst form of treason.
It really is. I mean, you can kind of respect the Marxists that actually believe in what they're advocating and trying to bring about. But yeah, the sort of the level of corruption and just criminality, in the Biden administration is shocking. It's been proven over and over again. The media poo-poos it, but he used his son as a bag man. There's no telling how much money has changed hands. And that's a big motivation. If what you want is money, that's a big motivation.
Nick, let's close out by me asking you about the power of a film like America Invaded. If I were to make the case for these documentaries, I would say that, look, a lot of Americans might know about something. Like there's bad stuff happening at the border, and maybe you've seen some clips on social media about it. But there's a great power to taking people who are perhaps not all that plugged into politics and just showing them what this looks like, because that makes them go, whoa, I mean, that was the effect of a lot of people who saw Police State. It's like, whoa, these are ordinary people talking. I had no idea that this was going on, and to such an extent. Do you think that this film might have the potential to do that? In other words, it's show, not tell, and there are Americans who have been relatively numb, indifferent, bored, distracted, occupied with other things, but they see this film and they're going to realize what?
Well, to me, this film really brings home the impact of America.
Film, and they're going to realize Americans who have been relatively numb, indifferent, bored, distracted, occupied with other things, but they see this film and they're going to realize what?
Well, to me, this film really brings home the impact of American policies on our military families, and talking to mothers and brothers who've lost their sons or their brothers, and to the veterans who've lost limbs, and how their lives have been affected by these policies. That's the part of it that I think really is the most impactful and could really change hearts and minds, because these things aren't just policy arguments in the abstract. These things affect people's lives in a very visceral way. And that's the most important thing about this film, I believe, is you get to see what the policies do to normal Americans, just people who are willing to step up and fight for this country and die for this country. And then to have the country turn around and let terrorists potentially just walk across the border after they've given their lives, after our soldiers have given their lives to fight them over there. Now we're letting them come in. And that's what I believe this film can show the American people.
I mean, it helps me understand not only that why the military has a recruiting problem, but why it actually deserves to have a recruiting problem. Because people are saying, you're signing me up, but for what? Guys, the film we're talking about is America Invaded. We've been talking to Nick Searcy, award-winning actor and producer. Follow him on X at YesNickSearcy. Check out the film.
So here we go. I think it's we're moving along here in American history, and I think it's important for our integrity and our conscience, and the sake of our American oath and our obligation as men of our own Constitution and our own Declaration of Independence, not just as some old documents written by revolutionary men with a quill pen and an ink blotter or whatever, but presently, in a current way, in a present time, when we declare to all the instruments of global power, globalist institutions who have always been trying to leverage their monopoly, their political hegemony, and their geopolitical strength in the world, and to amalgamate some kind of constituent component world government by which they could threaten the rest of the world. And we can see now that how important the so-called Holy Alliance, or the Congress of Vienna, really was. And I think that Henry Kissinger made that his central focus and his massive thesis everyone talks about. Jay Dyer likes to help us to remind us. But I think it's crucial for us to understand that if we're going to put the Congress of Vienna and subsequently the lesser known and lesser discussed behind closed door secret Treaty of Verona, 1822, just 11 years before the diabolical and dangerous Order of Skull and Bones was installed at Yale. And like we always like to say, at New Haven, Connecticut there, the following year, the Knights of Columbus were established there as an occult sister knighthood order, right? It's a papal knighthood order that subsisted separately from a public point of view. They subsist separately from the senior fraternity club with the Death's Head logo, skull and bones, of course. We have to make the jump that if they're both going to be established in New Haven, Connecticut, in the same 12-month period, then of course we have to imagine that they're part of the same occult structure that we face as the structure of battle against the American people and against the institutions of constitutional Republican principles that will allow America to be the greatest nation in the world. You can see that the eroding of those pillars is the eroding of America's power and prestige and economic strength in the world. You can't have both things. So it's a give and take. So the more that you blow out America's border, the more you destroy the value and the individual merit of the body politic of the American citizenry, the more you despoil the citizenry, it's to devaluate and to debase the actual value of the citizenry itself, right? So now you can't say that America has the wealthiest citizenry in the world per capita, because that every time another poor, uneducated, illiterate soul jumps over the border who can't speak English, then per capita our massive advantage and the value of the intellectual capital of our citizenship itself, our citizenry, is diminished and devaluated, just like our currency is. The more you print out more and more borrowed debt notes, federal debt notes. So in this way, we have to begin to take the position that the American Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and the Articles of Confederation and the struggle in America for supremacy between the states and the federal government, wherein the issue of slavery was used as a central fulcrum in that crisis. And like we said, it was always an instrument of geopolitical demagoguery on a large scale. And you can see that the juxtaposition and the change in position and the liberalization that was taking place in the world was something that was taken advantage of and capitalized on by the Congress of Vienna alliance. And catastrophically, and against good Christianity, the southern people and the southern nations clung on to the misguided remonstrances and the engagement from Europe to the Confederacy and the support from some of these, I think French, I have to go back and check all my history, but the French banks of Rothschild, family origin, different brother, different cousins, different branch in the family Rothschild tree over there in the French banks than from the London ones, right? But as I understand my banking history to go. But those banking houses were going to use massive funds, massive loans to the United States to support the North against the South, and the French banks would support the South against the North. And of course, as we always say, the Southern Confederacy got letters of support from the Vatican, and Jefferson Davis got letters of support from the papacy, from the Pope himself, right? So the Vatican, the Roman power structure, the elite nobility class, who were present at the Holy Alliance and made the alliance holy themselves, right? Let's not miss out on the Congress of Vienna was really a centerpiece of the Jesuits working with the papacy to exert geopolitical power. And so, of course, the Knights are established secretly in 1832 and 1833 in New Haven, Connecticut, the Skull and Bones and the Knights of Columbus. And then soon after, in the 1850s and 60s, the Civil War would explode. I think 1822 is the same year that England made slavery no longer a legal option. So that was a pretty quick turnaround, a pretty quick liberalization, a quick turn in the Congress of Vienna's military geopolitical planning and the countenance and the balance of their hegemony against the North against the South. and they funded it. They wrote letters of support to it. They hated Abraham Lincoln and made sure he was shot in the face. Like you have to be. I've never heard anything we were discussing before. If you were unaware that Abraham Lincoln was killed by a combination, a conspiracy of Roman priests and Jesuit coadjutors and Jesuit sympathizers. So, this weapon, just like Samuel Morris was pointing out again and again, this weapon against American democracy and American liberty that you now see taking the form of, like we always say, Klaus Schwab. It's just the latest low-level errand boy, low-level committee chair boy there to serve the interest and furthering of this long-term plan, which was the Congress of Vienna. We're trying to go to some extent and to do more research and to make it more apparent that the Congress of Vienna, the Holy Alliance, as it were, was just a reaffirmation once more of the Council of Trent and the war, the permanent, eternal declarations of anathema and war against all the people of the earth who would not submit to the Pope and bend the knee and go through the catechism and become good, Catholic ritualists, Roman Catholic ritualists, ultimately, and taking in all the different requirements of their estimation of God that requires you to do the beads and pray the Hail Marys and do the certain rituals and say the certain prayers and receive the communion from the priests that do their bidding. And that's how, taking in that cult ideology and that religio-cultic brainwashing and that dynamism, the ideation and the dynamism that comes from suppressing your own ability to think and giving your own emotions and mind over to the will and the charisma and the influence of these Roman papists will end up with, a conspiracy like with the one we saw that murdered Lincoln. So we have to recognize that the same power struggle is being, the same war is being waged here, and the same declarations of independence, and the same founding documents, and the same uncompromising constitution of American principles still remains in effect. And we read it as it is verbatim, and we understand it to be the foundation of law. And we have to do what has to be done here in America to put away with these emergency war powers, dictatorship, the military government, the war powers proclamations. That has to be put back. The sin and the crime against American liberty and America's republic that was committed against America and the European manipulation in America to stir up a civil war and see that the freedom and the emancipation of people who were enslaved in America could be set free in an orderly way. There was a way to proceed generationally with making sure that people were well integrated into American culture. And but what did the St. Leopold Foundation do? Which is like the Catholic Charities today. They brought in tens and tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of decimated Irish men and women and children into America and made sure that they were cannon fodder and conscripted into the Civil War, for which they took various sides, right? The Irish conscripts were known to switch sides based on the command of their priests or the papal letters or, so on and so forth. But we have to recognize that this same fight for liberty and independence and personal liberty of conscience and freedom of religion, the right to bear arms, all that stuff is still on the table. The same fight that was right in front of Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and Alexander Hamilton, the same individuals, the same mindset, the same resources, the same complexity of problems is there. We have to recognize that we have to stand firm. We have to make sure that our kids see us. It just reminds me of the different individuals that are suffering for their resistance against abortifacients and the child murder, the child sacrifice going on in this country are going to get sent to prison. And I suffer with them too. It's so devastating to see this system of tyranny and the system of human barbarism and butchery. And so, like I said, someday in the future we'll look back on this system of aborting children who have heart, ultimately have fingertips, and who have the ability to feel pain and to cry out, right, even in the womb, right. It's that these people are on the front line of the same fight that the abolitionists were on when they were suffering, when they had to fight against slavery early on. And if America would have listened to the Quakers and listened to some of the Methodists and some of the Presbyterians and some of the Protestant groups who were against slavery in America, if America had listened all along, we wouldn't have been suffering as we are now. And people who were enslaved in America could have been caused to be free, decades and decades, and even a century before the 1860s or whatever the historical day of the Proclamation of Emancipation was, which I think everyone understands that they were being freed long before that particular day, but the presidential declaration of it makes it more of a specific day, an hour, a moment when that's going to be taking place in American history, which is sad because it should have been long before England, long before France. So in order for us to understand our war as people of faith and people of the book of the King James 11 version of 1611, those are the individuals who were abolitionists, who were Anabaptists and Puritans and Quakers who were against slavery. Those are the individuals who fought hard in the black-robed militia of preachers across America who had a great awakening with Jonathan Edwards, right? The whole movement of God across America has everything to do with this movement. I mean, of course, like we always say, George Washington was baptized by John Ganow, a Baptist minister, right? That was the source of George Washington's power. Abraham Lincoln had fought to give freedom and liberty and dignity to a wrongly accused Roman Catholic priest. He suffered for the rest of his life the persecution from the Roman hierarchy and from the Jesuits, even into his, amazingly into his presidency later on. So that's why we say that this individual, Abraham Lincoln, has that same spiritual charge and the same energy that we need to see now in this republic. We hope to see from, Donald Trump. And, that greatness is in the making. And we hope that it doesn't turn around trajectory to become a great president to reinforce America's Constitution and America's founding documents and to get us on the right path with this central bank situation, which we could just dispose with the Federal Reserve and this massive, burgeoning, constantly building, right? We have this mounting interest debt growing at a massive rate, right? And it's accelerating, so we have to recognize that it's time to get that under control. We can't let America go down in flames in economic servitude and economic serfdom. This technocratic system, slavery, that you really see set up under the Woodrow Wilson era with Edward Mandell House. He was the architect in the background, who was the one kind of helping put into place this system of individual personal enslavement. Instead of individual personal freedom, it would be individual personal enslavement by your social security number and by your birth certificate. So in every way, you can see that this, and of course Roosevelt during 1929, through that period, through 1933, through the economic crash, right? Which was something that was put into motion by the titans and the larger than life financial titans of the time. And one of those was Joseph P. Kennedy, and he was a Knight of Malta and a super rich, amazingly rich individual, and he was one of the individuals who started the crash of the stock market in 1929. And so that everyone had to start turning in, when their debt was called, capital that was not available, and caused the Great Depression. So that's how the history of the Federal Reserve needs to be understood, as an instrument of European power and influence and enslavement over the American people, and a system that gives international banking, private banking monopolies a stranglehold on America's economy that should be considered a crisis of national security. Of course, in America, people who want to stop children from looking at pornography in children's classrooms, that's considered a national security crisis to these buffoons here in America. So we have to recognize now that in order to return to our Constitution and return to our Republican values and our democratic principles as Americans, as people who are declaring our independence from England and from London banking monopolies, and not bowing down in economic servitude to the Federal Reserve System, which is enthralled to London banks, right? So how can we declare our independence if we're in financial insolvency and total economic dependency to these people's private financial instrument that we made our national money, right? Isn't that stupid? So let us return once again to our book, our 1611 King James. Let's brush up on our old English vernacular and understand the terms. I too was surprised to find that a cockatrice was a snake, and a cobra in particular. Wow, fascinating. So there you go. Just, it's not that hard to learn. It's not that hard to, figure things out. It's not like we have to go back and go to Victor Davis Hanson and become experts in Hebrew and Greek and Latin and stuff, right? But, it just shows you, it gives you a sense of the times and a sense of the urgency and the vernacular and the common spoken tongue of the people of the time, and how they must have been profoundly amazed to read the red letters and read the words of Jesus Christ and his parables and the lessons of Jesus Christ, and how they must have been filled with the Holy Spirit, and how their homes must have been enriched and filled with the light of God because of those texts and those documents that were suppressed for centuries and centuries. That book in vernacular in English was, even in Latin, was on the list of forbidden books by the Vatican, right? So unless you had a priest there who was properly authorized from Rome, you were not to touch it or even look at it, right? You could be killed, you could be arrested by the Inquisition and questioned for months in a dungeon if you were anywhere near that book, or even if you had a single page of it hidden in your clothing. So there's a lot of history there with the Inquisition that we'll have to get into over time, which is exactly why America was founded and why America was designed and why it was made, why America exists, to be a place where the Inquisition cannot happen. And all the constituent components of misery and psychological torment and government-imposed butchery and tyranny by the state and torture and the inability to think your own thoughts, but to have to repeat the rote, determined Roman religion at the tip of the spear, right? You can't have your own liberty of conscience. That would be heresy, right? So we have to recognize that America was established so you could face your accusers, so there wouldn't just be a tribunal of inquisitors who could torment you without you ever facing your accuser, right? You had to have a jury of your peers decide, right? So the whole established system of American jurisprudence and democratic protections and the rights established by the Bill of Rights, etc., were situated so that the whole system of Roman tyranny and the divine right of kings and monarchs and princes and, with their noblemen and their horsemen who ride you down, right? All the lessons of Braveheart and the Magna Carta were all learned, and we were going to have individually protected rights under law, and we were going to have no protected establishment of religion, or Roman religion especially. But over there are Quakers doing their Quaker thing, and over here the Presbyterians were doing Presbyterian. Everyone was free to look at it their own way and to pursue God in the way that God blessed them the most to do, right? So let's never forget the truth of our founding documents and the repudiation of George Washington's canons against Roman ideology on Christmas night when he blasted those drunken British whoring papists, right, in New York Harbor or what have you. So that's what Christmas night should be remembered as, as a night to blow our cannons and blast the papal tyranny and the subjective British terror of redcoats and Hessians who are all there to enforce the will of a Jesuit-led monarch and despot in the person of King George III. And these same despots and monarchs today who are spewing this climate change rhetoric and this depopulation agenda, and whose forefathers talked about if they were diseases, they would come back and wipe out the planet. So all these MI6, plans, these London plans, these individuals are the same individuals we have to declare our independence from now. And it's time to get our credit card independence, get our debt and our loan independence from the banks. So let's get ourselves free and get ourselves situated and prepared for what it's going to take to get our own hard money and our own hard currency and our own valuable trading resources and currency back here in this country. And the fight for independence is going to require us to turn our cannons against old traditions of Roman popery, old traditions of holiday cheer, and Roman religious festivals and stuff that have nothing to do with the Bible, nothing to do with George Washington, nothing to do with Abraham Lincoln, but they were all the same fables and festivals and mythologies and reindeer games, right? Christmas magic, right? I'm not trying to pick on people. People are going to do what they want. They're going to go to Disney and join in with that. And of course, the Vatican is over there with the transgender agenda right now. They're mixing all of it together. The Vatican is with BlackRock, is with Disney, is with Klaus Schwab, and they're all together. And it's all about this process of jamming America with this same process of destroying America with illegal immigration and destroying America with these horrible policies that are being constructed at Georgetown University and Fordham University, if you want, and becoming enforced into law. And the fact is that we're totally in debt to trillions of dollars to our own enemies. So I would say that while the CCP is one of the greatest threats on the other side of the world, one of our own friends and supposed allies in the form of the UK and the old British Empire, the secret city of London and the banking square mile is still one of the greatest threats to our national security and our economic strength and our economic health in this country. And it's time to go ahead and just find a way to call the creditor and find the best way to get that whole balance knocked out and just close the account, because we're going to go ahead and, just like Andrew Jackson, we're going to kill the bank. We're going to kill the bank deal, and we no longer need the Federal Reserve System, and we'll go on our own from here. And that's going to be the way it is. That's going to be the way it is in the future if America is going to continue to exist.
By J. Michael Waller, who is president of Georgetown Research, a political risk and private intelligence company, senior analyst for strategy at the Center for Security Policy. He worked for the CIA in Central America. He received his military training as an insurgent with the Nicaraguan Democratic Force, the Contras. He did groundbreaking scholarship after the Soviet Empire's breakup and taught history and methods at America's premier intelligence schools. He's author of Big Intel, How the CIA and FBI Went from Cold War Heroes to Deep State Villains. I just finished reading it here, the digital version. I highly recommend it. Welcome to Geopolitics and Empire, Michael.
It's great to be with you.
I've followed your work and commentary for years online, and it's great to be able to speak to you finally. I noticed your dissertation is titled The KGB and Its Successors Under Gorbachev and Yeltsin. A few years ago, I went to Russia on a trip, and I got to actually meet and shake hands with Gorbachev, as well as people like Vladimir Posner. And again, your book, Big Intel, is a must-read. It's just out. But before getting into that, if you could just a bit tell us about your experience fighting with the Contras, getting your cryptonym from the CIA director at a Catholic mass. Pretty wild life you've had.
It was a lot of fun, and it was one of those things where you start out very young as a college undergraduate, and you really don't know what you're getting into, and you don't understand the context all around you. It was really quite a time to be around then, too. When imagine being a college freshman when Jimmy Carter's president and then Reagan is elected your first semester. And you're casting a vote for him absentee from your dorm that's 3 blocks from the White House. So you're just in the middle of all of this. And then, so it's just if you like to make connections with people and get a good internship somewhere to start work, then there's no end to where you can end up.
Yeah. And, I've had on recently Brian Fairchild, former CIA officer, who detailed his experience as well. And so, you get into that in some of that in your book. And Big Intel has also made me start to rethink some of our history. I thought the Red Scare in America had been overblown, but, given some of what you detail, maybe not entirely. And you start by looking at the history of how Marxism began to take root in America, which has led us to where we are today. And so if you could tell us a bit about that and whether you think, the Red Scare was to a degree warranted, given how today Marxist subversives are attempting to take down America.
Yeah, sort of the Red Scare was a name given to something the way people today, if they don't like your views, they call you a racist or a conspiracy theorist or something. So the Red Scare is an analog to that. There was plenty to be genuinely frightened about and there were 2 so-called Red Scares. One right after World War I and the Bolshevik Revolution, when there was a huge wave of immigrants from Central Europe who came here with communist ideas, communist revolutionary organization. They were kicked out of their own countries, or they were not free to, not free to operate in their own countries. So they came to America, and rather than becoming Americans, they remained true to their, either communist or radical socialist or anarchist ideas to overthrow the country that took them in. So when by the end of World War II, we're finding there are whole networks of these people in the big coastal cities in Chicago and elsewhere. There was only one person in the Justice Department who had an office in charge of this, and this was a young law school grad, still in his early 20s, named John Edgar Hoover. So he started out, his first job in the Justice Department was to identify and round up foreigners who were anarchists or communists or radical socialists who wanted to overthrow us, round them up, and then deport them back to Russia.
And you even detail, because I'm a Croat, my parents come from former Yugoslavia. You detail, I think it was Thomas Babin in the book, one of the subversives. And I did want to read a quote here. It's interesting. You talk about Hoover. You paint a measured picture of J. Edgar Hoover again, which makes me rethink who he was. And it seems our government back then protected us from agitators, and today it actively works with them and employs them. I'm thinking of people like Alejandro Mayorkas of the DHS and some of the rest of the Biden regime. I was watching Clay Higgins a week ago talking about starting impeachment of Mayorkas, and you write, quote, in 1918, Hoover earned a promotion to run the Alien Enemy Bureau to lead the fight against anarchists and Marxists. He was 23. At least 6,500 German nationals sat confined in camps under his authority, with another 450,000 under some kind of monitoring. And that Congress amended immigration law to protect against foreign extremists wrecking America. All aliens who disbelieve in or advocate or teach the overthrow by force or violence of the government of the U.S. shall be deported. And so there seems to be quite the difference between back then and now, doesn't there?
Yeah, I mean, this was Woodrow Wilson of all people. The crown prince of modern, the king of modern progressivism, who was doing this, and it was not a political partisan issue. It's like, yeah, these people are here to overthrow the nice system that we have, where everybody agreed on American founding principles. And then these troublemakers from abroad are coming among the big masses of people who just want to be good Americans, and they want to wreck it all for us. So the problem was, though, the laws were never sufficient to do the job properly, because they're talking about overthrow of the government by violence. There were no laws about overthrowing the government by subversion. And this is where we look to see things like the Frankfurt School of Thought. It was a Bolshevik operation, a political operation, political warfare, to overthrow the Weimar German government, post-World War I government. So Germany was defeated, it was demoralized, it was tearing itself apart with various factions of, monarchist, republic types, socialist, anarchist, fascist, Nazi. Fascists were Italian, but they got their inspiration from that, and then the far left factions were fighting among themselves. So the Soviet idea was, let's just wreck Germany, not through a Bolshevik style, violent insurgency. Let's cause it to collapse on itself from within. Let's just destroy its culture, and then we'll come in and just take over. But their problem was that Hitler beat them to it, and so they fled before Hitler cracked down on them. Went to Paris, went to Switzerland, went to the UK, and then a lot of them came to the United States in a deal that was brokered with a Soviet intelligence agent to have them set up shop at Columbia University to teach the teachers. And from there, critical theory was developed. That was one of the places where critical theory was developed to bring us what we have today with critical law theory and critical race theory and DEI and all that other stuff that's haunting us now.
And before getting more into that, something you mentioned in the book is Operation Trust. Some of us learned about this during the whole QAnon phase, and some people have likened QAnon to have been akin to Operation Trust. And any thoughts on Operation Trust and or QAnon?
Well, Operation Trust, and I kind of take it in the book that the communists are really evil. There's really few things besides the Nazism that's worse than what the communists were doing and continue to want to do. But you have to admire them for their ability, for their strategic thinking. They were thinking in terms of decades and generations. They weren't just thinking about a next election cycle. So we have to think about that. How do we grapple with something like that that's so strategically minded? When they launched this critical theory operation, they said this is going to take generations and we won't be alive to see it come to fruition. So back to Operation Trust, it was brilliant. This was, the Bolsheviks had taken power in Russia. They hadn't yet consolidated control. There was a Russian civil war raging, all squabbling factions against the Soviets, and they were all looking for money. So what did the Bolsheviks do? They funded their mortal enemies. They funded their military opponents to get them to come back to Russia where they were living in exile, to get them to organize, to get them to become dependent. They had no idea that the opposition to the communists had no idea they were being funded by the Bolshevik secret police. The purpose was for the communist government to find all the networks. Who are they? Where are they? Bring them back into Russia and then exterminate them.
Yeah, I mean, they're doing, unfortunately, incredible work. And then getting back to what you mentioned, that the Frankfurt School, they shifted, some of this class war paradigm. You write, quote, the cultural Marxist originalists would tear apart societies not by economic class and the hard currency of capital, but by religion, law, race, family, tradition, knowledge, patriotism, and beliefs. And really today it's going wild with the sexual madness, the trans, LGBT stuff, the racial aspects, right? Black versus whites. The target of the family, Marx did talk about in his writings, I believe, attacking the nuclear family. So if you could tell us more about this Frankfurt School and how, they've marched through our institutions.
Yeah, well, we all think of Marx as some sort of deranged economist who had an economic revolution where the poor working masses would, the proletariat would gather together and overthrow the rich, French word, bourgeoisie, the wealthy few. And that's how we all think of Marxism. But that was Marx in 1848 when he wrote the Communist Manifesto. Earlier, in 1843, Marx focused not on economics, but on culture. How can we destroy everything? Destroy your sense of being, your nationhood, your community, your church, your religious faith, no matter what it was. Destroy it all. Pit the children against the parents and pit everybody against one another. All the Greco-Roman, Judeo-Christian heritage of Western society, tear it all apart. Tear apart everything that's good. So it was a nihilism that he was promoting. Nihil is the Latin word for nothing. So it's nothingism to bring about this great revolution. And anyway, that didn't catch on. So he then reverted to economics, and then that's how it ended up. So this is what cultural Marxism is all about. You go to Wikipedia now, and somebody switched it from what cultural Marxism really is to now it says cultural Marxism, conspiracy theory. So it's all about conspiracy theory, even though Marx wrote it himself, and you have a lot of Marxists who wrote about cultural Marxism. And that's what the Frankfurt School was done in Germany with Soviet Communist International coordination and with the head of the Soviet secret police presiding at the first meeting. And then when they went into exile with the rise of the Nazis, they came and they brought it to the United States. We didn't have anything like this before. So it was Herbert Marcuse and Adorno and these other cultural Marxists who then thought, well, Stalinism's not cool, it's not fun, it's bureaucratic, it's always whatever the Soviet line is we have to do. Let's have a real revolution and let's make it fun. Let's put drugs in it, let's put sex in it, let's put getting trashed in it, let's just have a really fun time while we tear apart the society that's oppressing us. So it always became the oppressor versus the oppressed. So now it's moral values, family values, religious values, patriotism. Those are all oppressors. And, they were all made up by white guys. So white people are the oppressors, and they're inherently oppressive. So this brings you to critical law theory, where the Constitution is oppressive. So we have to make it a living document to make it mean whatever we want. And then the white people who invented it were oppressive because they were racists and therefore had no moral values. And so our whole system is based on racism and hate and white supremacy. So we have to tear it all apart. So that's where you get Ibrahim Kendi and these other fanatics with their critical race theory that became the doctrinal base for diversity, equity, and inclusion that's permeated not just our, everything that we can see in public, but permeated the FBI and the CIA as a core value.
Yeah, you get into that in your book, and it's really all madness. I grew up in the U.S. in a multi-ethnic, multiracial setting, friends from all walks, and I never thought about these things. And it's just like all of BLM, CRT, DEI stuff. It's like they're obsessed with race and all these. It's like they're the racists pretty much. And of course, we can't not mention Yuri Bezmenov, who you discuss in the book. You talk about the Soviet spy Ellis, his real achievement influencing the creation of American foreign intelligence. You say Stalin had his own form of globalism. Now the new American foreign policy establishment had a globalist raison d'etre of its own. You talk about Soviet influence operations. And Bezmenov, he was famously interviewed by G. Edward Griffin, who took me. Griffin took me out to lunch about a decade ago. I got to spend some time with him, and he's been a guest on this podcast. But if you could tell us more about what Bezmenov revealed, as well as other defectors, Soviet influence operations, subversion, and active measures.
Yeah, well, it was really neat to see that Bezmenov's 1983 and 1984 interviews and lectures had been preserved on video and put up on YouTube, because there you could go back to a man who was a trained Soviet propagandist. He wasn't a KGB officer, so some of his detractors who want to deny the truth of anything, well, he wasn't KGB. No, he was better than a KGB officer because he was trained to be a Soviet propagandist, and he was trained in psychological manipulation. So when he defected to the United States, moved to Canada, and explained all of this, he put it not just so that he was right at the time, 40 years ago, but in retrospect, he was 100% on the mark. If you go through his various stages of how to destroy a society by doing exactly what the cultural Marxists are doing, you find that Bezmenov really was a political prophet in a sense. He foresaw everything that's happening to us because this was a Soviet operational science used to soften up societies, to tear them down. And now the fact that this was a Soviet, and a KGB creation, critical theory, and everything Bezmenov talked about. So it's a foreign subversion that the FBI, by law, is supposed to be fighting, and that the CIA was created to combat right after World War II, and they failed us. Now, the FBI didn't fail us at the time, and the early CIA was fighting this like crazy. J. Edgar Hoover was warning for decades about this. He could see it happening, and this again wasn't something that I thought of. I read all his speeches and testimony and articles and books and turned it into something new. I hadn't read most of those things, and then later on I thought, I wonder what Hoover said about all of this, and found, whoa, he had been warning about this since 1920.
Which is why, as I said, as reading your book, I kind of rethinking Hoover, because we're given this really negative view of him. And he, as you point out, he had some points. We were under threats. And, I do have a burning question. I've had folks on the podcast like Jeff Nyquist who posit that there is, we had, forgetting the defector's name now that he talks about. I've got his book, but that there has been this long, century-long plan that the Soviets faked their collapse. But, do you see a continuity from Soviet Union to current Russian Federation in terms of these active measures? Is the Kremlin today, secretly closet globalist or Marxist? Any thoughts here?
Well, not Marxist per se. So they don't have that ideology that drives them anymore. It's really become a thugocracy. But if you were there with your eyes open during the Soviet collapse, you could see it happening if you followed the laws, if you followed who was getting promoted, if you followed all of these things that were happening under Gorbachev and Glasnost. He was designing a system to keep the KGB in place. So when the Soviet Union collapsed, when Boris Yeltsin and Ukraine and Belarus seceded from the USSR, Yeltsin in Russia had no political party. What did he need to keep in power? He needed the old KGB. so he kept it in power. He gave it places of privilege. They had laws saying that every joint venture with a foreign company had to have a KGB officer as one of its vice presidents. So you had KGB. So it was all laid out. There was no looking back to expose the archives, to expose the operations, to put certain people on trial, or to just have some sort of an exposure and reconciliation. There was nothing like that. And the George H.W. Bush administration wasn't interested, and the Clinton administration wasn't interested in promoting this. So it's bipartisan. They didn't want these archives out. But unless you expose the past and so that it can never be revived and those networks can never be preserved, you're going to repeat it. And that's precisely what happened with the rise of Putin and the KGB gangster state. So while the communist ideology is not still yet there, the communist methodology and the old KGB networks did survive. There was a former FBI agent, Ralph Hope, who was a German specialist, and he has a recent book called The Gray Men, about the old East German Stasi networks and what happened. So if you figure East Germany collapsed a generation ago, 1989. But the Stasi network survived, and they went private, blackmailing people using those files. So you had Gerhard Schroeder, the former chancellor of Germany, head of Germany's Gazprom. He was part of the Nord Stream pipeline deal. He was instrumental. He was effectively a Soviet asset. And then the people that he brings in are his assets. So you have this continuation of this system with a Russian hand still behind it. And we don't treat it like it's a continuum of the old Soviet KGB.
So could we say, if we look at this oligarchy out there in Kremlin, that this program has been continuing in the U.S., this Marxist subversion active measures? Do you think Putin is painted as this conservative sometimes who speaks out against some of this satanic transgender madness, but do you think the folks out there in the Kremlin are like sitting back and thinking, oh, well, let's let this, critical race theory and DEI play itself out in America and take down our adversaries? Or do you think they'd be happy to see that dealt with in the U.S.?
Well, yeah, I mean, just think if your strategic adversary is destroying itself, the last thing you want to do is intervene. Now, in looking at the research, I don't have any evidence at all that there's a present-day Russian hand behind DEI, but there was an old Soviet hand behind it for sure. It began as a Soviet covert operation, and people like Herbert Marcuse, who was a main figure in the New Left, and Obama even wrote in his own memoirs how he studied closely under Marcuse, and the people who raised him in Chicago politically were Marcuse followers. He had been a Soviet agent. Now, you go to the CIA website and it says he was a wonderful OSS intelligence officer for the United States during World War II. Yeah, but he was a communist penetration agent of the OSS. He was not an American patriot, but he was able to use that OSS credential for the rest of his life. And yeah, well, I'm pretty much out there on the cultural side, but I still served in World War II. No. He served basically as a Soviet agent to infiltrate our system. So when you have Soviet agents who create doctrines that then shape the worldviews of Americans who become attorneys general and senators and even a president of the United States and intelligence officers, that's a hostile foreign penetration of our system that we should be protecting against and calling out, and that certainly was not done. So, however, though, if you look, to get back to your point about a possible Russia hand, the same people who were pushing the Trump collusion narrative, Trump's a traitor, he's working for Putin, he's Putin's man, were the same ones who were wedded to the Saul Alinsky's and the Herbert Marcuses and the critical theorists and cultural Marxists brought up through the old commentary. So there's something there that it's like a deflection point. These people were never anti-Soviet before, and all of a sudden they're anti-Russian today, and they see a Russian under every bed. So you talk about Red Scare, they're doing a similar thing right now, and they have been for the past, couple election cycles but falsely. with no facts behind it, simply slander, to shut down other points of view and to destroy political people that they don't like.
Yeah, it's just crazy how the tables turn. And you also go into detail of, the OSS, the FBI, the OSS, later the CIA, how American intelligence was penetrated by communist spies. You mentioned Pearl Harbor, how Moscow agents in Washington steered policy discussions and may have been involved in bringing Pearl Harbor about. I've got the book by Robert Stinnett, where former Navyman who uses declassified files. I'm of the belief that there were a few folks in the administration who knew Pearl Harbor was coming but didn't say anything. But some of the info in your book makes me think, well, maybe some of those were the communists who wanted to let it happen. But thoughts on that, or just how deep the communist penetration has been in the American intelligence and in military?
Well, first, this is the big deal about why someone's a communist and not just a leftist. Communist Party members had to take an oath of loyalty to the Soviet Union. And back pre-Pearl Harbor, they had to take a personal oath to Stalin and to make the United States basically another Soviet republic. That was their oath to a foreign power. They go into our State Department, into Hollywood, into journalism, into World War II intelligence. They are willful, knowing, witting, controlled Soviet agents loyal to another country. They're not just liberals or lefties. So that's a distinction that we have to make, and that's a distinction that a lot of liberal and lefty scholars have completely overlooked. So that's why they have terms like Red Scare or whatever. This is real Soviet penetration of our institutions. So when we went into World War II, we didn't have an intelligence service. It had to be set up right away, and they think, well, we need to fight the Nazis and the Imperial Japanese. We need people who are from those countries, who speak those languages, who understand the dialects, who know people inside, who might have networks inside. Let's bring them in. Anybody to fight the Nazis. Well, the FBI was warning, wait a minute, you're bringing in Communist Party members who were loyal to Stalin, but you had other people like a great intelligence leader, the founder of U.S. foreign intelligence, General William Wild Bill Donovan. Really important figure in our history, but his one fault was he didn't understand what the Soviet threat was to us internally, because he viewed the Soviets as allies against Hitler. And he didn't look, as few looked at, what are the Soviets' plans for the world after the Axis enemy is defeated. Well, by the time we got into the war, and 1943 comes around, Stalin realized, as did Churchill and even Roosevelt, it's just a matter of time before Hitler is defeated. The Soviets were not at war against Japan. They didn't want to have that second front across their 11 time zones. They wanted to focus all their resources on defeating the Nazis, which was great from a Western European point of view, and it was good from a U.S. point of view. But we were now on two fronts in the war with Japan. But the Soviets had a goal starting really in 43 to shape the rest of the world, so that by the time the war is coming to an end at the Yalta Conference, President Roosevelt, who was really ill, had a cognitive decline also at the time, brought in, as part of his delegation with Stalin in the Soviet Union, Soviet agents to advise him, like Alger Hiss, and kept out. It wasn't Roosevelt who did it, but I mean the people around him did. Kept out the people who really knew the system, sort of liberal anti-communists like George Kennan, who was stationed at our embassy in Moscow. He knew the Soviet leadership better than anybody, and he was really an architect of our later post-Roosevelt Cold War containment strategy. So you didn't have people who understood Soviet intentions advising the U.S., which is the reason why the U.S. just gave Stalin pretty much what he wanted at Yalta. Well, this shaped the whole rest of the world. It shaped yours and my lives. It shaped everybody, because it brought along the Cold War and gave the Soviets their huge sphere of influence, because the Soviets had penetrated our decision-making system and our intelligence system, and our leaders didn't understand it. But Hoover did, and he warned about it, which is why he comes across as such an unusual hero in the book. He had plenty of faults, But when you're leading Federal Bureau of Investigation for 48 years, and you have almost no laws limiting your powers, I mean, of course you're going to step over the line, and you're obviously going to do that, and the more power you have, the more likely you are to abuse it. So yes, those things happen. But if you look at his motivations, he understood exactly what needed to be done to defend the United States from foreign subversion.
You mentioned in your book, you list some of Hoover's commandments, and they apply today. Some of the things include: don't confuse liberals or progressives with communists. Don't let communists in your organizations or labor union outwork, outvote, or outnumber you. Don't be hoodwinked by communist propaganda that says one thing but means destruction of the American way of life. That's happening as we speak. Don't let communists infiltrate into our schools, churches, and molders, shapers of public opinion, the press, radio, and screen. That's happening all over the place in churches today and in schools. I'm a former educator, teacher, professor, and I've seen that. And then you, in your book, you detail how, around the year 2000, things really come to a head, that the CIA had mainstream sanitized Herbert Marcuse. You discussed the Patriot Act, all the changes that happened in the CIA, FBI, likened to Minority Reports, and thoughts on that. And then you even mentioned the DHS, and something that happened to me 2 years ago. The Department of Homeland Security banned me personally from PayPal when they rolled out the disinformation, the now defunct Disinformation Governance Board in April of 2022. I figured out through the Mike Benz, his work, and others that it was the DHS telling PayPal to ban me, a U.S. citizen, just for doing what we're doing now, which is completely insane. And so, your thoughts on the year 2000 and how we got to where we are.
Well, it's a strange finding. It's part of the discovery when you do research. You'd never, if somebody had told me, I would have thought it was crazy talk and, put on a tinfoil hat and go away. But looking at the powers that J. Edgar Hoover had, virtually no laws limiting his power. The secret files he had on politicians and presidents and, so many others. He was far more restrained than the current FBI is, and even parts of the Department of Homeland Security. He was more restrained when it came to abusing power than our present-day security apparatus is. And that's really scary because he didn't have SWAT teams. FBI had no tactical units. He didn't have high-tech access to anything. He did during World War II, the Army Signal Corps, but he didn't have what the current FBI has and the databases that everybody has access to. So he didn't have an effect on the life of every American citizen. And then the FBI itself was structured so that the cases, the criminal cases or the investigations began from the field offices, from the bottom down. Now there are 56 field offices around the country. And so they were started at the bottom down, and then they would be, coordinated or whatever from the top. Today, though, since 9/11, they can be initiated from the top and imposed from the bottom. So with this centralization of our intelligence services, and then the new centralization of the FBI. So you have, on one hand, Office of the Director of National Intelligence created after 9/11 to coordinate what were now 17 different intelligence agencies that had always been separated so they wouldn't abuse power and threaten our country. They are now under the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. The purpose was to avoid the stovepiping. Like, all the services are just passing information up through their own stovepipe, and they weren't cross-pollinating. And that's how bin Laden got away with 9/11. Some might argue, even persuasively. So there had merit to that. But what he ended, and then adding 60 new management positions to the top of the FBI, creating a giant top-heavy bureaucracy that started running things now from the top down. Because President George W. Bush told FBI Director Mueller after 9/11, who'd only been on the job for a week, I never want to have another terrorist attack against Americans in our country. So Mueller said, okay, fine. So he set up this system with bipartisan support. And then the monstrous Department of Homeland Security that merged all the security apparatus. Well, That might be okay as a temporary measure when we've suffered a terrible attack like we did in 2001. But it set things up so that when Obama came in office and his band of critical theory, cultural Marxist adherents came to office, they imposed their critical theory from the top down because Bush had set it up in a centralized fashion. So they were easily able to manipulate it from the top. But at the same time, mainly since 9/11, there had been a recruitment drive to hire so many new people with this new Department of Homeland Security, in the FBI, in the CIA, that, well, these folks coming out of the American, education system where now founding principles were a bad thing, where basic cultural Marxism really dominated so much of American academia, and especially in the fields like law, like national security, like foreign affairs. The exact people going to the Justice Department and the FBI and the CIA were imbued with this. And then over time, they began to outnumber the people, or at least outpower the people who just really had a sense of mission to be a good public servant and support Uncle Sam and the Constitution. So it was from the bottom up being recruited, and then from the top down, they would reach in and pull up these radicals to positions of middle and upper management, and then impose this across the whole national security apparatus.
So has that got you interested? That is a very fascinating audio clip that we got from Geopolitics and Empire, and we're going to add it here into the show notes. And with that, we got to go, guys. We got to go, and we expect you guys to support and to go to our sponsor, wendyslimited.com, and buy something really beautiful and sexy for your female loved one or spouse or what have you. And go ahead and make sure you come back and see us again real soon. Thank you for coming back to Looking Glass Forum. So here we are, guys. We're back with Wendy's Boutique, wendyslimited.com, wendyslimited.com, and the hottest boutique couture online, boutique supremacy online, Wendy's Boutique. So we've got to remind you guys, wendyslimited.com, our great sponsor. Please go and support her and support all the hardworking folks over there that are trying to bring you the best fashion design and designer brand name labels anywhere. So we just have to remind you that wendyslimited.com is where you need to go.